Hello, friend, and welcome to the Sleepy Meteorologist. Tonight, we're unraveling the gentle process of how tornadoes form, slowly, softly, and with calming clarity. Not the dramatic kind you see in action films, but the quiet, invisible ballet that happens high above the fields, in the soft layers of the sky. It's a story that begins with warmth, with rising air, and with small atmospheric decisions made far, far overhead. Together, we'll follow the subtle clues the atmosphere gives us, from a whisper of moisture to a slow turning wind. And we'll observe how all these soft ingredients come together sometimes to create one of nature's most curious shapes. But here, there's no urgency, no rush, only a patient walk through the calm side of the storm's formation. Maybe your day has been full. Maybe it's time to let the wind settle. How's the sky looking where you are tonight? Can you feel the hush in the air? If you enjoy these calming meteorology journeys, feel free to like or subscribe, only if it feels restful to do so. Let your body get comfortable. There's nothing you need to do but rest. Let's begin. We begin our journey not in the middle of a storm, but far before anything even begins to stir. Not with drama, but with balance, with quiet preparation, with the slow, silent mixing of invisible layers in the sky. Tornadoes, curious as they are, do not appear from nowhere. They are not sudden decisions made by the clouds. They are the final movement in a long and peaceful process that begins in the stillness. Let's look up, gently. High above us, the atmosphere is always arranging itself. Each layer, each breath of air, has its own temperature, its own moisture, its own sense of movement. Sometimes, these layers are content to stay as they are, but sometimes, they begin to notice each other. Down near the surface, warm air starts to gather. This air is moist, gentle, and lighter than what floats above it. It rises, slowly, like a thought beginning to form. Higher up, cooler and drier air rests in place. Heavier, more stable. But even that layer can begin to move when nudged by the right conditions. And in between those layers, wind begins to whisper. It doesn't howl. Not yet. It moves gently at first, shifting direction just a little, changing speed ever so slightly as it glides through the air. This difference in the wind between the surface and the higher sky is one of the earliest hints that the atmosphere is beginning to align itself. It's not loud, it's not visible, but it's happening. Imagine you're watching pieces of silk slowly drifting toward each other on a still pond, meeting, overlapping, folding into one another without a splash. This is how a tornado begins, with soft contact, with drifting layers, with quiet preparation. The earth, too, plays its part. The ground may be warm from sunlight earlier in the day. Moisture may rise from fields, lakes, or coastlines, adding invisible softness to the air above. These little gifts of warmth and humidity rise upward, not in a rush, but as a steady offering to the sky. Meteorologists call these ingredients, and like a recipe, they must be just right. Warm, moist air near the ground, cool, dry air above, and a little bit of wind that turns or changes with height. It's a delicate balance, not too much of any one thing. Too much wind, and the storm pulls itself apart. Too little moisture, and the clouds never fully form, but just enough of each, and something begins to stir. Still, at this stage, there's no storm, no funnel, not even a raindrop, only potential, only the quiet promise of something that could happen if the atmosphere continues to cooperate. And that's what makes this part so special. It's the hush before anything has spoken. the breath before the sentence, the open canvas of sky before any colour is added. So here we pause, resting in the softness of this setup. We honour the quiet work of the atmosphere, its slow layering, its subtle shifts, its invisible gestures of alignment. And as the sky prepares, so do we. This is the beginning of the story of how tornadoes form. But it's not a story of chaos or fear. It's a story of motion, patience, and gentle complexity. We are only at the threshold, and there's so much more to feel, softly. Instability, a word that might sound sharp or unsettled at first, but in the atmosphere, it's something much quieter, much softer, much more patient. When meteorologists speak of instability, they don't mean chaos or turbulence in the way we often imagine. They mean readiness, possibility, a gentle willingness in the sky to let things move, to let air rise, to let change slowly unfold. Tonight, let's imagine we're floating, drifting upward through layers of atmosphere that feel like silk. The air around us is warmer than the air above. Not by much, but just enough. And because warm air is lighter, it wants to rise. In a stable atmosphere, the air might try to lift, but eventually it's stopped, cushioned by cooler air that refuses to let it pass. But in an unstable sky, the rules are different. In instability, the rising air is encouraged. It finds the atmosphere not as a barrier, but as an open hallway. Each level it reaches is still cooler than the last, allowing it to continue rising, higher and higher, with only the lightest resistance. And so, the air floats upward like a balloon loosed from a quiet hand, free, unhurried, finding its way through the open corridors of the sky. This is the kind of environment that allows tall clouds to form, the kinds of clouds that grow not sideways, but upward, towering, billowing, almost sculptural in their shape. Cumulus becomes cumulonimbus, puffs become pillars, and deep within, something begins to stir. Instability is measured scientifically through temperature differences, parcel theory, and something called CAPE, or convective available potential energy. But here, in the quiet of our narration, we don't need numbers. We only need to feel the gentle willingness of the atmosphere to lift, to rise, to let go. When you picture the atmosphere as a series of stacked blankets, some warm, some cool, you can begin to see how motion begins. Warmth at the bottom wants to escape. Coolness at the top doesn't weigh it down. And in between, the layers give way, allowing a slow and silent ascent. It's a balance that changes from moment to moment, a sky that listens, that shifts, that allows. Instability doesn't shout. It doesn't flash or rumble. It's the quiet prelude to what may come later. In many ways, it's like the feeling you get before a gentle dream begins, when your mind is calm but curious, and something soft begins to take shape just out of reach. This is what the atmosphere feels like in moments of gentle instability. Not turbulent, not loud, just softly primed. And though we often think of storms as sudden or fierce, the truth is, they rely on this subtle readiness. The sky must be willing, the layers must align, the air must be free to rise, like a sigh released from the surface of the earth. In these quiet conditions, even a small nudge, like a passing breeze or a patch of sunlight warming the ground, can send a column of air drifting upward. And from that motion, clouds may grow, and from those clouds, more stories may unfold. But for now, we stay here, in this gentle chapter of the sky's preparation. We acknowledge that before anything can form, the atmosphere must first say yes. Instability is not a warning, it's an invitation, and tonight we've accepted it, gently quietly, with eyes turned skyward. The sky is ready. Moisture is the quiet giver in the sky's story. It doesn't arrive with a flourish. It doesn't draw attention to itself. But without it, the sky cannot build, cannot lift, cannot bloom. Moisture is soft, invisible, and always moving. You can't see it at first, not in the way you see clouds or rain, but you can feel it, in the thickness of the air, in the way a breeze feels against your skin. It's the silent softness that makes the atmosphere feel full. Tonight, we turn our attention to this gentle ingredient, to how moisture rises, hides, transforms, and becomes the quiet fuel behind the formation of tornadoes. Down near the surface of the earth, moisture is stored in many places: in lakes, in rivers, in soil, in leaves and blades of grass. It gathers during the day, warmed by sunlight, drawn up into the air by evaporation, an invisible sigh released from the land and water. Once lifted, that water vapor becomes part of the sky itself. It drifts upward, hidden inside warm air, still invisible, still silent, but it carries potential, soft energy, waiting to be set free. Meteorologists often talk about dew point, a gentle measure of how much moisture is in the air. When the dew point is high, the air feels heavier, more humid. It means there's more water vapor floating around us, more invisible softness filling the space between ground and cloud. As warm, moist air begins to rise, lifted by the gentle instability we explored in the last chapter, it eventually reaches cooler layers of the atmosphere. And when that happens, something beautiful begins. The moisture, once hidden, begins to reveal itself. It condenses into tiny droplets, forming clouds. And with that condensation comes a quiet release of heat, a soft exhale of warmth known as latent heat. This warmth gives the rising air even more energy to continue upward. It's as if the air is being gently encouraged to keep going, to climb higher, to unfold. So moisture does two things, both essential. First, it allows clouds to form, the visible signs of the invisible process. And second, it provides energy through that gentle release of latent heat, quietly powering the atmosphere from within. When there's just enough moisture, the sky begins to sculpt. Soft cumulus clouds appear, fluffy and low at first. Then they begin to tower, stretching upward as moisture continues to rise and condense. A simple puff becomes a quiet column. A quiet column becomes a canvas for movement. And still, all of it remains calm. Even in the early stages of a thunderstorm, moisture continues to feed the process without noise. Like a gentle hand beneath the weather, it lifts, supports, and fuels the rising air. In tornado formation, moisture plays a foundational role, not by creating the spin, but by helping the sky build tall and strong enough for rotation to take hold. It's the cloud's breath, the storm's drink, the sky's secret softness. Without moisture, the atmosphere stays shallow. With it, the sky becomes deep and expressive. And yet, it all starts quietly. A slow drift of vapor, a gradual climb, a transformation from invisible to visible, from softness to structure. Moisture doesn't rush. It listens. It responds. It arrives gently and offers what it has, becoming cloud, becoming warmth, becoming the breath that lifts the sky. And so we honor it tonight, not with loud appreciation, but with quiet attention. We recognize the role it plays, the energy it shares, the beauty it brings. As we drift through this chapter, let us remember, even the smallest droplets can shape the tallest clouds. Even the softest moisture can lift the mightiest sky. And in that softness, something wonderful begins to form. air doesn't leap. It doesn't pounce or surge upward with force. It lifts gently, gradually, like a sigh released from the earth. It begins quietly, encouraged by warmth below and welcomed by cooler skies above. Tonight, let's float with that first breath of rising air. Picture the sun, hours ago, warming the ground. That warmth doesn't just sit on the surface. It radiates upward, softly heating the layer of air closest to the earth. That air becomes lighter, buoyant, almost weightless. And then something shifts. It doesn't rush, but slowly, gracefully, the warm air begins to rise. This motion is called convection, and it's the first quiet act in the story of a storm. Not an explosion, just a gentle movement, a subtle encouragement, as if the ground is whispering to the sky, "Go on, lift." The atmosphere listens. Above, the air is cooler, thinner, more spacious. It creates room for the rising warmth to enter. The higher the air climbs, the more it cools. And if there's enough moisture riding along, something beautiful happens. Clouds begin to form. The water vapor, invisible in the beginning, condenses into tiny droplets. This is the birth of a cloud, a soft unveiling. And as the droplets gather, they release a gentle warmth called latent heat, a quiet offering that gives the air even more reason to rise. It's a peaceful ascent. The rising air doesn't push its way up. It's not aggressive. It's buoyed, lifted by differences in temperature, aided by moisture, supported by a patient sky. Sometimes this lift is caused by the ground warming unevenly. Other times, a passing front helps nudge the air. Mountains can also help, gently guiding air upward like a ramp. But no matter the source, the result is the same: a slow vertical drift that sets everything into motion. You might think of this as the sky breathing in. The earth exhales its warmth, and the atmosphere draws it upward, layer by layer. Meteorologists observe this process through something called thermals, rising bubbles of warm air that form on sunny days. Birds know this feeling well. They ride these invisible columns, soaring without flapping, lifted effortlessly into the blue. In the same way, a small parcel of air, once lifted, may continue to rise, provided it's still warmer than the air around it. This is the heart of instability we spoke of earlier. And once it starts, it often continues. The air may rise a few thousand feet, or tens of thousands, forming towering clouds that reach high into the troposphere. But at this stage, it's still all so peaceful. There's no thunder yet, no lightning, no swirling winds, just the slow building of structure, the atmosphere beginning to stretch and yawn, opening itself upward. We watch this moment with stillness, not for spectacle, but for awe. To think that something as powerful as a storm begins with something so calm, so slow, so gentle. And maybe there's a message in that too. That strength doesn't always start with sound. That energy can begin in silence. As we continue our journey through tornado formation, we'll carry this image with us: the quiet lift, the soft breath, the rising air that starts it all. There's a quiet turning in the sky, not something you can easily see, not a spiral in motion, not yet, but a soft difference, layer to layer, a shift in direction, a tilt in the wind's invisible spine. Tonight, we explore wind shear, a subtle force that helps shape the possibility of a tornado. Not with noise or fury, but with delicate change. Wind shear sounds technical at first, but at its core, it's a simple, quiet truth. The wind near the surface of the earth is often different than the wind high above it. Sometimes, the surface wind flows from the south, warm and moist, moving gently across open fields or wide plains. But higher up, the wind might come from the west, or even the southwest, stronger, drier, and faster. These winds don't clash, they don't collide. Instead, they pass over one another, like two dancers moving to different rhythms in the same quiet room. The result? A gentle turning, a subtle tilt. If you could draw the motion of the air, it would look like a spiral slowly reclining on its side, not spinning quickly, not tightening yet, but forming a long, stretched tube of rotating air, horizontal, peaceful, and patient. This is the seed of something more. Imagine a soft ribbon lying flat in the sky, gently spinning. That's what wind shear creates: horizontal vorticity, a quiet rotation tucked between layers. But it doesn't rise on its own. It waits, and when warm air begins to lift, as we explored in the last chapter, it can tip that rotating ribbon upright. The horizontal spin becomes vertical. And now the sky holds something rare: air that is beginning to rotate around a central axis, upward. This vertical rotation is essential for the formation of a mesocyclone, the spinning core of a supercell thunderstorm. And from there, given the right conditions, a tornado may eventually develop. But here, in this chapter, we stay with the softness, with the quiet, tilting wind, with the changing directions that speak in silence, with the atmosphere's slow and graceful twist. Wind shear doesn't roar, it doesn't cry out, it whispers, and that whisper can become a spiral. Pilots know wind shear by feel, how it moves across wings, shifts during takeoff, or curls near mountains. Meteorologists measure it in wind profiles, using weather balloons and radar to watch how the sky's breath changes with height. But tonight, we don't need instruments, only imagination. Let's picture the sky as layered silk, each layer drifting a bit differently, angled just slightly apart. These shifts, layer by layer, set the atmosphere into a soft rotation, like threads slowly winding into shape. Wind shear, then, is not a single gust. It's not about speed alone. It's about variation, a difference in direction, a difference in pace, a difference in space that quietly builds potential. And so, as we lie here listening to the hush of the air around us, we remember, even the gentlest turn in the sky can carry the promise of something extraordinary. Not loud, not sudden, but beautifully aligned. Wind shear is the brushstroke the sky uses to begin its spiral. A slow tilt, a gentle spin. Let's follow that rotation and see where it leads next. In the great gallery of skies, some clouds drift, quietly, with no intention to grow. Others build upward, like castles made of vapor and light. And then there are the ones that rotate, the ones that move in slow, deliberate circles, the ones that think before they act. These are called supercells, the graceful dancers of the atmosphere. They are rare, they are balanced, and tonight we'll meet one, not in a storm-chasing frenzy, but in a moment of still appreciation. A supercell is a thunderstorm, yes, but not just any storm. It has a unique heart, one that turns. Inside its towering shape is a mesocyclone, a slowly rotating core of rising air, like the eye of a slow spinning storm sculpture, turning steadily, quietly, under the watch of the upper winds. Let's imagine it now. We're lying on a quiet plain at dusk. The air is still, the horizon is wide, and up above, a cloud begins to grow. It starts like any other cumulus cloud, puffy, bright, relaxed. But then it stretches, upward, outward. Its base darkens, its top cools, and slowly, almost meditatively, the entire structure begins to turn. You wouldn't see the spin right away. It's hidden inside, subtle, smooth. But if you could drift beside it, like a bird or a balloon, you'd feel the circular pull. Not violent, not chaotic, just steady, like a gentle wheel turning through the layers of the sky. This is the supercell's gift: balance. Warm, moist air feeds it from below. Cool, dry air slides in from above. And wind shear, the gentle turning we spoke of earlier, helps tilt and rotate the whole column of rising air. Instead of collapsing on itself like other storms, the supercell stays upright. It rotates, reinforcing its own structure. It breathes in moisture and warmth from the ground, and exhales cool air and precipitation aloft. This separation keeps it alive longer than most thunderstorms. While ordinary storms may last half an hour, a supercell can live for hours, slowly moving across the landscape like a floating sculpture, reshaping the air around it. And despite its potential for strength, it begins beautifully, quietly, in harmony. At the anvil-shaped top, ice crystals fan outward, catching the sun's last light. Below, the cloud's base lowers, forming a smooth, dark layer known as the rain-free base, a calm, wide ceiling where dry updrafts continue to rise. Sometimes, if the balance is just right, a wall cloud may appear beneath that base, turning slowly, like a pendant hanging from a necklace of air. Everything about a supercell is structured, composed, like a symphony in slow motion. Meteorologists are drawn to them, not for the danger, but for the design. They are atmospheric architecture, a storm built with symmetry, intention, and poise. And though they can sometimes produce tornadoes, tonight we're not looking for what may follow. We're resting inside the moment of formation. We're floating beside a storm that spins for its own sake. A cloud that doesn't rush, that doesn't burst, but instead rotates softly, as if to remind the sky that motion can be beautiful. And so, as the winds gently feed it, and the air softly lifts it, we sit in stillness. We watch this dancer move, we honor its grace, and we remember that even the most powerful storms begin with balance. The supercell is not an alarm, it's a whisper, a quiet revolution in the clouds. Inside every supercell, the type of thunderstorm most likely to produce a tornado, there lives a quiet rhythm, a rotation, deep and slow, like the sky's own heartbeat. This rotation is called a mesocyclone, and in this chapter, we drift beside it. Imagine standing on a wide, open plain, the air soft and still. Overhead, a vast cloud towers upward, stretching miles into the sky. From the outside, it may look calm, just a tall thunderstorm wandering through the afternoon. But inside, something begins to turn. A mesocyclone is a rotating column of air, often several kilometers wide. It forms when wind speeds and directions change with height, a gentle tilt in the atmosphere. These changes cause the rising air to spin, slowly, like a soft spiral unwinding in the clouds. But this spin isn't aggressive or chaotic. It's organized, steady, balanced, and it's this quiet, patient turning that sets a supercell apart. We often picture storms as loud and sudden, but a mesocyclone forms with grace. It's like watching a ballet begin in the sky, air that rises and curves, then folds back into itself in a beautiful loop. This rotation begins aloft, far above the ground, nested in the cloud's middle layers. The updraft, warm air moving upward, gently tilts horizontally, spinning air into a vertical column. Over time, this vertical rotation deepens, like a pulse echoing through the storm. From a distance, radar sees this rotation before the eye can. The mesocyclone doesn't announce itself loudly. It's often invisible, tucked away inside a thunderstorm's soft folds. But the signs are there. Wind patterns begin to curve. Precipitation wraps around a central column. The air feels subtly different, charged, but not urgent. It's a balanced dance. The updraft keeps the mesocyclone tall and strong. Meanwhile, the downdraft, cooler air descending, wraps around it, like a hand supporting a spinning top. And within this slow spin, conditions may quietly shift toward tornado formation. But for now, we're just observing. No tornado, no descent, just rotation, just circles upon circles, soft, slow, and serene. Think of it as the storm's core, but not its fury. Its center, yes, but not its chaos. And like a heartbeat, it can continue for a long time, pulsing, turning, whispering through the cloud layers like the sky is breathing. Inhale, exhale, around an invisible axis. Some mesocyclones remain gentle and never touch the earth. Others go on to support funnels and tornadoes. But either way, the beauty lies in their quiet persistence. Tonight, we float alongside this turning air. We feel no danger, only rhythm. We listen to the way the sky moves in circles, as if thinking. And now, we turn toward the rising motion that feeds this spin. Let's move upward with it. The storm breathes in, and that breath is called the updraft. It's not a roar, not a blast. It's a quiet, rising stream of air, warm, moist, and gently determined. A pathway upward, steady and soft. Tonight, we'll explore how a storm stays alive, not through force, but through a single, focused current. A column of air that rises, lifts, and holds its shape. It begins near the surface, where the ground has warmed from the sun's touch. That warmth doesn't sit still. It begins to rise, encouraged by cooler air above, and drawn upward by the invisible pull of buoyancy. This is convection in its softest form. No thunder, no flash, just the steady ascent of air carrying its gentle energy into the sky. But what makes this updraft special, what makes it last, is its focus. You see, rising air doesn't scatter in every direction. It holds together, as if the atmosphere has carved out a soft tunnel for it to follow. And as this air rises, it cools. Moisture condenses into droplets. Clouds form, and with every drop that condenses, a quiet warmth is released. Latent heat, like a soft sigh from within the cloud itself. That warmth helps the air keep rising. It's a cycle of support. Lift begets lift. Warmth begets motion. The updraft grows taller, wider, more organized, but it never loses its gentle pace. Even in the heart of a supercell, this rising air is graceful. It doesn't rush. It flows, and it flows in one direction, up. This focused stream of rising air is what allows the storm to build, to stretch upward through layer after layer of the troposphere, sculpting towers of cloud that seem to defy gravity. From a distance, you might see the anvil-shaped top of a storm, flattened where it meets the stable lid of the upper atmosphere. Below that, the column of rising air continues, hidden inside the cloud. It feeds the storm from the inside out. And because of wind shear, those soft, turning layers we've explored, the updraft can tilt. It angles slightly, allowing falling rain and sinking air to stay separate. This keeps the updraft free and focused, undisturbed by the storm's own outflow. In many storms, the updraft collapses under the weight of its own precipitation. But in a supercell, thanks to that graceful separation, the updraft stays alive longer. It continues feeding the storm, quietly, reliably. This is how a storm becomes self-sustaining, not by churning violently, but by protecting its breath, by lifting warmth through a single, serene pathway. You can imagine the updraft as a slow elevator, carrying parcels of air upward, each one holding heat, moisture, and possibility. As they rise, they contribute to the storm's structure, layer by soft layer. And just like that, the storm grows. But it never forgets its breath. The updraft is its lifeline, and the sky, in return, shapes itself around it. So tonight, we drift upward with this stream. We float inside the storm's breath. And we listen not for thunder, but for motion. Not for noise, but for continuation. Updrafts are quiet builders, soft carriers of warmth, and without them, the sky would have nothing to hold on to. Let's rest here for a moment, in the heart of this lift, feeling the quiet current carry us upward, into the next chapter. What goes up must, in time, come back down, but not with a crash, not with noise. In the calm language of the atmosphere, descent can be soft, like a curtain falling slowly at the end of a gentle play. Tonight, we drift downward with the downdraft, the quiet returning breath of the storm. We've followed the warm air as it rose, lifting moisture, shaping clouds, fueling the sky's slow spiral. But now we observe the other half of the storm's breath, the exhale, the downward motion that completes the cycle. Downdrafts are formed when the rising air begins to lose its buoyancy, when the heat that carried it upward is used, when the moisture condenses, and when cool air begins to take its place. Picture raindrops forming high within a cloud. Each one begins as a tiny droplet clustered around a speck of dust or salt. As they grow, they fall, dragging air with them, and that air, cooled by evaporation and contact with the rain, becomes heavier, denser, and begins to sink. But it doesn't fall abruptly. It descends like mist over a mountainside, slow, wide, soft. This is the downdraft, a flow of cooler air moving gently toward the ground. It's not the opposite of the updraft. It's its companion. Together, they form a loop, a rhythm. The storm breathes in warmth and breathes out coolness. From a distance, you might feel the first hint of a downdraft as a cool breeze ahead of the rain. A soft hand brushing your cheek, a quiet signal that something is gently arriving. As the downdraft reaches the surface, it spreads outward, like ripples from a dropped pebble. This outward push of cool air is called the outflow, and it has its own delicate role to play. The outflow can lift the air in front of the storm, nudging warm, moist air upward and helping to spark new clouds, new growth, new balance. It's the sky's way of preparing the next breath. But within a supercell, especially one trying to form a tornado, the downdraft becomes even more specific. It may form a concentrated column of descending air near the core of the storm. Meteorologists call this the rear flank downdraft, or RFD. This RFD wraps around the mesocyclone, gently cradling it. It interacts with the rotation, shaping the lower portions of the storm. And sometimes, only sometimes, it helps focus the spin near the surface, forming the quiet conditions from which a tornado may softly emerge. But tonight, we are not watching for that. We are simply following the descent. Downdrafts are not destructive forces in this story. They are balancing agents. They return coolness to the earth. They carry energy back down. They complete the storm's breath. And when the storm begins to weaken, the downdraft often takes the lead. It spreads across the ground, cutting off the updraft supply of warmth. The storm loses its lift, its rotation begins to fade, and the sky slowly begins to settle again. It's a graceful conclusion, like a dancer stepping quietly back into the wings. No curtain call, just the end of the movement. So we watch from below, lying beneath a softening sky. We feel the air shift, cool, calm, restoring. And we understand now that the storm is not only about what rises, but about what gently returns. The downdraft is the sky remembering gravity. It's the air coming home. Let's rest here, in this moment of balance, before we move onward into the quiet place where all these parts begin to join. Every breath begins with an inhale. And for a storm, that inhale is called inflow. It's the atmosphere's way of gathering. A slow, quiet drawing in of air. Not rushed, not forced, but steady, patient, purposeful. Tonight, we'll stand just outside a growing supercell, our feet grounded, our gaze lifted, and feel the inflow move toward the storm like a breeze returning home. This breeze is not cold. It's warm, moist, full of energy. It comes from open fields, from sun-warmed earth, from lakes and coastlines that have quietly given their moisture to the air. And now, that air is being pulled in, not violently, but gently. It's being invited, welcomed. The storm does not demand. It breathes in with calm intention, drawing this warm air toward its base, where it will rise, spin, and become part of something larger. You might stand a mile or two from the storm and feel this inflow brushing past you. It moves low along the surface, directed toward the storm's center. It carries humidity, it carries warmth, and it carries potential. To the untrained eye, it may just feel like an evening breeze, but to the atmosphere, it's a lifeline, a river of invisible fuel. This inflow feeds the updraft we explored earlier, the storm's rising breath. Without it, the storm cannot build. Without it, the supercell's rotation begins to weaken. Inflow is what keeps the storm alive. Meteorologists sometimes look for signs of strong inflow by watching grass sway, or smoke drift, or flags flutter toward the storm. Even birds riding the breeze can tell you which way the air is moving. But tonight, we don't need measurements, only presence. So let's imagine we're standing beneath a soft grey sky, just before sunset. The storm is far enough away that it doesn't feel threatening, but close enough that we can feel its pull. The wind moves toward it, brushing past trees and rooftops, flowing steadily along roads and valleys. Not roaring, just moving, feeding. As this warm inflow moves in, it slips beneath cooler air aloft, helping to fuel convection, rising motion that builds the storm's structure from within. If rotation has already begun inside the supercell, this inflow will help stretch it. It flows inward and upward, adding momentum to the spin. It's part of how a mesocyclone remains strong, how a wall cloud may form, and how, eventually, the atmosphere may prepare for something even more focused. But we're not there yet. Tonight, we're simply noticing the inhale, the breath before anything takes shape, the quiet motion of air returning home. Sometimes, the inflow can be felt just before a storm strengthens. Sometimes, it surges as the storm draws in more energy. And sometimes, when the storm weakens, the inflow fades, like a breath slowing before sleep. It's always in service of balance. Inflow doesn't force the storm forward, it offers. And the storm, in turn, lifts what it's given, rising into towers of cloud, into softly spinning structures, into the delicate beginnings of something more. So tonight, let's pause here, just outside the storm's reach, feeling the sky's breath move past us, letting it flow, letting it feed. Inflow is not a rush, it's a gathering, a quiet inhale of warmth, moisture, and possibility. And as it moves, the storm begins to deepen, its base lowering, its rotation tightening, its next chapter quietly forming beneath it. Let's follow that flow and see what begins to appear. As a storm continues to draw breath, as it turns, lifts, and flows inward, there comes a moment when the cloud lowers. Not all clouds fall toward the earth, but in certain storms, especially those with balance, patience, and rotation, one part begins to descend. It's called a wall cloud. Tonight, we'll stand quietly beneath the sky and observe this special formation, not as a warning, but as a structure, a shape the atmosphere carves with care. Wall clouds are not violent. They are low, broad, smooth-edged. They appear beneath the rain-free base of a supercell, usually tucked just beneath the mesocyclone, where inflow rises and rotation deepens. At first, you may not even notice it forming. The storm's main cloud base hovers above, flat and wide. Then, slowly, part of that base begins to dip. A lowering, a gathering, a darkened portion of sky that becomes its own feature. This is not the tornado, but it is the place where one might form, given the right ingredients. Let's imagine it now. We're lying in a quiet field, the air still warm from the day. Above us, a supercell drifts gently across the sky, and beneath its center, a dark, rounded shelf begins to take shape. It turns slowly but steadily. Its edges are clean, not ragged. Its center looks heavy but contained. There is no rush, no roar, only quiet organization. Wall clouds form where warm inflow rises most strongly into the mesocyclone. As the moist air ascends, it cools rapidly, causing condensation to occur at lower altitudes. That's what creates the drop in the cloud base. A new layer appears beneath the main one, closer, darker, and more focused. You can think of it as the storm narrowing its breath, like lips pursed before a soft whistle, like a river pulling into a channel, preparing to flow more deliberately. And though wall clouds may look ominous, many of them never produce a tornado. They simply rotate in peace, passing by like floating terraces in the sky. But when conditions are just right, when wind shear, moisture, lift, and spin all cooperate, a wall cloud can become the quiet bridge between sky and surface. This is the atmosphere's decision point. Meteorologists often watch wall clouds closely, looking for signs of tightening rotation or changes in shape. They may see tendrils of cloud reaching down, or rising motion at the edges. They listen to radar. They observe with care. But here, in our bedtime story of the sky, we don't forecast. We don't chase. We simply watch. We lie back and witness the calm geometry of the wall cloud, a smooth underbelly of the storm, suspended in thought. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't force its way. It waits. It turns. It considers. There's something mesmerizing about this moment in the sky. A hush, a held breath. The cloud has lowered, the structure has focused, and somewhere inside the spiral, the atmosphere is making a quiet choice. Maybe it will stretch downward, maybe not. But either way, the wall cloud is where the path becomes clear. It's the narrowing of everything, the place where updraft, inflow, and rotation all meet, drawing the sky's energy into a singular place. Tonight, we rest in that place. We let the shape speak for itself, and we continue with it, gently, into the moment where something more defined may begin. Let's stay close to the curve, and wait with the clouds. There is a moment in the life of a storm that feels like a pause, not an ending, not quite a beginning either, just a quiet narrowing of attention. This is the moment when a funnel may begin to appear, not suddenly, not all at once, but slowly, thoughtfully, as if the sky itself is testing an idea. A funnel cloud is not yet a tornado. It hasn't reached the ground. It hasn't completed the connection between sky and earth. Instead, it exists in between, a soft question mark hanging in the air. Tonight, we'll watch this moment without expectation, without urgency, only with calm curiosity. Beneath the wall cloud we visited in the last chapter, rotation continues. Warm air rises into the storm's center, turning as it goes. The mesocyclone tightens gently, like hands coming together in a slow clasp. As the air spins faster, not violently, but more precisely, the pressure inside the rotation lowers slightly. And with that lowering pressure, the air cools. Cooling leads to condensation, and condensation becomes visible. At first, it may look like nothing more than a faint lowering, a soft finger of cloud reaching down from the wall cloud's base, thin, wispy, almost uncertain. This is the beginning of a funnel. It doesn't rush toward the ground. It doesn't stretch with force. It forms delicately, as if being drawn by a careful hand. You might imagine steam rising from a warm cup and slowly curling inward on itself. That's the feeling of this moment, air tightening its circle, becoming visible as it cools, revealing motion that was already there. The funnel may grow longer, or it may fade away. Some funnels appear briefly and dissolve back into cloud, never touching the earth. Others linger, adjusting their shape, narrowing or widening as the storm above continues its quiet breath. What matters most is that this stage is still gentle, still undecided. The sky is exploring balance. Inside the funnel, air is moving upward, not downward. It spirals gently, drawn toward the storm's heart, and around it, the atmosphere remains calm, supportive, watchful. From the ground, a funnel cloud can be difficult to see at first. Its edges are soft. Its color blends with the sky. It doesn't announce itself. Often, it becomes clearer only when sunlight catches its curve, or when condensation thickens enough to outline its shape. Meteorologists may notice it tightening on radar. Observers may see it lowering bit by bit. But tonight, we simply watch it exist. A funnel is not a promise. It's a possibility. It is the sky experimenting with connection, testing how far rotation can extend, exploring whether the balance of forces will allow the spin to reach the surface. Sometimes, the air near the ground responds. Cool air from downdrafts interacts with warm inflow. The circulation strengthens, and the funnel stretches farther. Other times, the atmosphere decides otherwise. The rotation weakens, the condensation lifts, and the funnel gently fades, leaving only memory behind. Both outcomes are natural. Both are calm. So tonight, we don't anticipate what comes next. We simply observe the narrowing spiral, the quiet geometry forming between cloud and earth. The funnel is the storm's careful handwriting, a line drawn slowly in the air, not bold, not rushed, just deliberate. And as we rest beneath this moment, we understand something important. Before a tornado becomes a presence, before it becomes a name or a shape on the ground, it is first a question asked softly by the sky, and the sky always takes its time. We remain here, suspended in this gentle uncertainty, waiting, watching, breathing with the clouds. The story continues. There's a moment, quiet, subtle, and often unnoticed, when a funnel becomes something more. Not with a crack or a flash, but with a slow, deliberate extension. It reaches and touches. This is the touchdown, the gentle moment when sky and soil meet. Tonight, we witness this quiet crossing, not as something fearful, but as a connection, a joining of the atmosphere's breath with the land's quiet waiting. Above us, the funnel has been turning for some time. It has narrowed slowly, drawn downward by rotation and balance. Air has risen in gentle spirals. Clouds have deepened, and the wall cloud has turned, steady and patient. Then, without warning or sound, the funnel touches the surface. And in that soft instant, it becomes a tornado. But not all tornadoes arrive with drama. Many are quiet at first. They form in open fields, distant from towns and roads. They begin their lives as graceful, moving shapes, curved, tapered, drifting like dancers across wide spaces. The moment of touchdown is not always visible. Sometimes the funnel is still forming. Sometimes the condensation hasn't yet reached the ground, but the rotation has. Swirling air at the surface now connects with swirling air above. A bridge has formed. From this point onward, the tornado becomes real. Not only a shape in the sky, but a presence on the earth. Meteorologists identify this moment with care. Radar may show a debris signature, a swirl of leaves, soil, or dust lifted gently into the air. Observers might see a swirl at the surface, even before the funnel fully descends. But here, in the quiet of our imagination, we simply feel it, the connection, the meeting, the slow merging of motion above and below. The tornado begins to take form fully now, still narrow, still uncertain in shape, but grounded, spinning in contact with the surface, defined. It moves with the storm, guided by the structure of the supercell, nudged along by the gentle flow of upper-level winds. And yet, it remains tethered to the earth, a swirling column of air, visible or invisible, bridging two realms. There is a reverence in this moment. The atmosphere has been shaping this for hours, layer by layer, lift by lift, spiral by spiral. And now it has touched the land. But even now, it remains peaceful in its own way. Not all tornadoes are destructive. Some last only a minute. Some spin harmlessly in empty spaces, dissipating as quietly as they arrived. Others grow. They change shape, change speed, change purpose. But that is for another chapter. Tonight, we simply honor the moment of arrival. This is the atmosphere completing a sentence it began in silence. A funnel extended, a spiral grounded, a breath finished. There is no applause, no fanfare, only the presence of a form that has always lived in the sky's potential. And as we watch, from a safe and softened distance, we recognize the beauty in connection. The way sky and soil speak without sound. The way air can touch the land and leave only wind in its path. The tornado has formed, but it began with quiet, and it touched down with grace. Let's follow its motion now, as it shifts shape and becomes something slender, something elegant, something like a thread drawn across the earth. Not all tornadoes are wide. Not all storms arrive with grand gestures or towering shapes. Some come quietly, slim, delicate, winding, more like threads than columns, more like ribbons than funnels. These are called rope tornadoes, and tonight we'll follow one, not in a rush, not in fear, but as a curious shape gliding softly across the earth. Rope tornadoes are among the most graceful forms the atmosphere can create. They appear near the beginning or end of a tornado's life. Sometimes they are the first form a tornado takes, narrow, twisting, unsure of its place. Other times they are the final shape, fading, stretching, thinning as the storm begins to let go. Either way, their presence feels different. More like a drifting vine, less like a tower. Picture a slender funnel, barely wider than a tree trunk. It descends from a distant wall cloud, curving slightly in the breeze. It leans and turns, sways and narrows, dancing between sky and soil. Its movement is slow, its voice is quiet, and its form is always shifting. Because of their size, rope tornadoes can be difficult to spot at first. They often blend into the landscape, especially near sunset, when shadows stretch and colors soften. They don't always have a defined edge. Sometimes they appear translucent, their motion revealed only by the dust or leaves they lift gently into the air. They don't announce themselves, they whisper. And so, tonight, we watch from afar, resting in the grass, the air still warm from day, as this thin strand of motion begins to wind its way across the horizon. Unlike large wedge tornadoes that fill the sky, rope tornadoes feel more like threads drawn by an invisible hand. Their spirals are tighter, their form more delicate. They sometimes look like curls of smoke or silk unraveling from a spool. But don't let their shape mislead you. Even rope tornadoes can carry strength. Their winds may still rotate at high speeds, and when focused, can lift or twist what lies in their path. Still, we stay with the softness. We watch not for damage, but for design. In meteorology, a tornado often ends its life in this shape. After growing in width or height, after spending time fully formed, the tornado begins to stretch. Its rotation weakens, its funnel narrows, and the sky begins to let go. The storm is no longer feeding it. Inflow has slowed, the balance has shifted, and so the tornado begins to fade. It doesn't vanish in an instant. It pulls itself into a thread, a curve, a last expression of movement, and then it lifts, back into the air, back into the cloud, back into memory. Some rope tornadoes, however, never grow beyond their narrow form. They stay slim from start to finish, born as threads and gone as whispers. There's beauty in that simplicity, in that quiet presence, in the way the sky can sculpt something so precise, so winding, so peaceful. Tonight, we hold space for that beauty. We let the soft shape move across our imagination. We trace its curves, watch its gentle sway, and breathe with its motion. And as the rope tornado leans back into the sky, as it unspools one final time, we prepare to enter a deeper stillness. Because inside every spiral, no matter the shape, no matter the strength, there is a center, and that center is where we go next. Let's drift inward, toward the calm at the heart of the storm. There's a common belief that a tornado is all chaos, all spin, all sound. But deep within that spiral, tucked quietly into its very center, there is a moment of calm. Tonight, we drift toward that stillness, not to rush into the wind, but to find the quiet within it, to listen to the space at the heart of the vortex. You see, a tornado is made of layers. Around the outside, the wind turns with force, rotating swiftly in a tight spiral, carrying air, droplets, and sometimes even debris in wide, circular motion. But as you move closer to the middle, something changes. The winds don't stop all at once. They slow, they curl inward. And at the very center, at the narrowest point of the funnel, there can be stillness. This center is sometimes called the eye or the core, though it's not the same as the wide, defined eye of a hurricane. Here, it's smaller, more intimate, more mysterious. Inside this calm, the pressure is low. The air may be rising or even resting, suspended between motion and quiet. There may be less wind or almost none, and in some cases, this space is calm enough to allow dust or leaves to settle softly back toward the surface, only to be caught again by the rotation moments later. It's a delicate balance, motion surrounding stillness, a spiral that protects its center, like the hush at the center of a deep breath. Let's imagine we're floating now, not being pulled or pushed, just drifting gently into the tornado's middle. The outer layers of wind swirl around us, creating a cylinder of motion. It's not loud here. It's not sharp. It's quiet, in a way that feels almost sacred. The sound you'd expect, the roar or the rush, is muffled. Instead, there's a soft hum, a whirling lullaby shaped by the air itself. The light is filtered. Clouds may wrap above. Dust may swirl below. But here in the center, all is slow. All is suspended. It's a place of paradox, the calmest part of something made from motion. Meteorologists don't often get to study this space directly. It's small, transient, changing moment by moment. But some tornado researchers, in rare and carefully documented cases, have described this stillness, brief and astonishing, at the heart of the storm. And those who've observed it say it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels quiet, like the eye of the sky has blinked and opened again. For us, tonight, this becomes a resting point, because even within a storm that spins and moves and turns, there is always the chance for stillness, for silence, for center. We may not remain here long. The storm will shift. The spiral may widen or tighten. The winds may rise again. But in this moment, we've found peace within motion. And perhaps there's something deeper here, a reminder that even in the rush of life, even in the most powerful currents, there is space for quiet, not outside the storm, but within it. So let us stay a little longer, feeling the softness of the air in this hidden chamber, listening to the near silence that turns beneath the sky, a calm heart surrounded by movement. And when we are ready, we will rise again, carried gently upward as the storm begins to stretch and change. The tornado's life continues, but inside it always carries this quiet place. Let's remember that as we drift onward. We often imagine tornadoes as racing, roaring, charging across the land with fury and speed. But that isn't always how they move. Some tornadoes drift. They wander. They take their time. And tonight, we'll follow one of those. A quiet funnel crossing a quiet field. Like a thought that hasn't quite finished forming. Tornadoes are guided by the supercells that create them. And supercells too do not always hurry. They can move slowly, carried by upper-level winds, steered by atmospheric patterns, but never rushed. They follow the mood of the sky. So too does the tornado below. It mirrors the path of the storm that holds it, but often at its own pace, slightly offset, slightly delayed, slightly dreaming. Imagine a wide, open landscape. No towns, no roads, just fields. Tall grass leans gently in the breeze. The sun has set, and the sky glows in soft blues and lavenders. In the distance, a slender tornado moves, not galloping, not tearing, but drifting, like a ribbon caught in a slow current. Its base turns in smooth spirals. Its top leans into the sky, and the entire form slides across the land with soft deliberation. This movement is called storm motion, and every tornado has one. It's not just the rotation that matters, but the path it takes as it turns. Some tornadoes travel only a few hundred feet before fading. Others move for miles, gracefully stretching across fields, hills, or quiet plains. And even as they turn, their motion forward is steady, patient, almost poetic. The wind inside may be fast, spinning tightly, creating motion close to the surface. But the funnel's journey is slow. It doesn't lurch, it flows. If you could float above it, you'd see the spiral glide over rows of crops, over a fence line, over a still pond that barely ripples as the funnel passes by. You might hear only wind, no roar, no rumble, just a low hum as air shifts places. This kind of tornado is not aggressive. It's present, and as it drifts, it leaves subtle marks, bent grass, scattered petals, a memory shaped in silence. Some tornadoes move in a straight line, others meander. They may curve slightly or loop gently as they interact with terrain, with wind, with changing inflow. Their paths are not always predictable, but they're not chaotic either. They're sculpted by the invisible hand of the atmosphere and drawn across the earth like a brush on a canvas. Meteorologists trace these paths using radar, satellite, and ground surveys. But tonight, we trace it with our breath. Slowly, step by step, spiral by spiral. This is not the story of destruction. It's the story of motion, soft and layered. The tornado becomes a wanderer, its direction determined by forces far above, but its presence grounded in the quiet world below. And as we walk beside it in our imagination, we don't fear it. We listen, we watch. The funnel is not in a hurry. It's moving as the atmosphere allows, no faster, no slower, just enough to stay in step with the rhythm of the storm. And eventually, as the supercell begins to change, as inflow weakens, as balance shifts, the tornado's path slows even more. It begins to stretch, to lean, to rise. And like a thought that has come full circle, it begins to fade. But for now, it still drifts. And we drift with it, quietly tracing a line through sky and soil, through motion and meaning. Let's follow this slow spiral into the forces just beneath it. The surface, the ground, has its own part to play. And that's where we go next. The sky moves freely. High above the earth, the wind flows without resistance. Fast, smooth, unbothered. But near the ground, something changes. Down here, the atmosphere touches trees, grasses, rooftops, hills. It meets fences and forests, lakes and fields. And in that meeting, it slows, just a little. It turns, just slightly. This gentle slowing is called friction, and tonight we'll explore how it plays a quiet, essential role in the birth of a tornado. It's easy to think of tornadoes as creatures of the sky, spinning shapes that descend from clouds, guided only by winds above. But they are also shaped by the earth beneath them, and friction, that soft resistance between air and surface, helps stretch and focus the storm's spin. Let's imagine we're walking barefoot through a wide meadow. The grass bends beneath our steps. The air is warm, moving softly around us. Above, a storm turns quietly, its supercell balanced, its mesocyclone rotating, its funnel beginning to take shape. Now, think about the wind in that moment. At the surface, it's slower. Near treetops and hills, it curves and shifts. It rubs against the ground, the crops, the buildings. This rubbing slows the pace of the wind, even as the air above keeps moving more quickly. That difference between fast air aloft and slower air below creates vertical stretching. It's like twisting the top of a ribbon while holding the bottom still. The middle tightens, the shape narrows, the spiral sharpens. Friction near the ground helps this process. It doesn't create the tornado on its own, but it gently encourages the atmosphere to focus its spin, to align its turning into a concentrated, upright motion. Rotation that was once horizontal begins to tilt. The slower base allows the column of air to stretch taller, and as it stretches, it speeds up just as a figure skater spins faster when pulling their arms in. All of this happens without sound, without flash, just wind brushing against land, and the land offering quiet resistance. Friction is stronger over forests than open plains, stronger over cities than lakes, stronger where the surface is rougher, where obstacles nudge the wind into curves and spirals. And so, each tornado is shaped in part by the land it moves over. The earth participates. It's not a passive stage beneath the sky's drama. It's a soft sculptor, shaping the wind's path, guiding its angles, helping the storm focus its breath downward. From above, this might look simple, but close to the ground, it's a complex, delicate dance of motion and texture. Even slight hills can shift the flow. Even rows of trees can alter the balance. Friction is subtle, but powerful. It doesn't stop the storm, it refines it. And because of that friction, a tornado can become something visible, something shaped, something formed. Tonight, we honor that role. The surface beneath our feet, quiet, unmoving, yet deeply involved in what happens above. Friction reminds us that even resistance can be part of creation, that slowing down can sharpen a spin, that softness can shape power. As the tornado moves forward, spiraling gently, guided by the storm above, it always carries the signature of the land below. And when its time comes to stretch down, to reach toward the earth, it does so with help from the surface that welcomed it. Let's remember that as we look upward once more, because sometimes the tornado splits, sometimes it dances in multiples, and in the next chapter, we'll watch those spirals move in harmony, never colliding, just turning together. Sometimes, when the conditions are just right, the spiral becomes more than one, not in chaos, not in disorder, but in balance. Some tornadoes contain not a single vortex, but several, small, elegant swirls, spinning around a shared center, like dancers tracing quiet circles beneath a wide sky. These are called multiple vortex tornadoes. And tonight, we'll sit softly beside one, watching the sky choreograph its most delicate motion. At first glance, the tornado may seem ordinary. One funnel, one shape, a single narrow column moving across the land. But if we look closer than the eye alone can often see, we notice something more. Inside that main funnel, smaller whirls appear. They orbit the central axis. They rise, spin, fade, and reform, never in conflict, never in haste. They don't crash. They don't spiral out of control. They move together. Each vortex, smaller than the main tornado, is a concentrated twist of wind. They form briefly and spin quickly, rotating within the larger structure, much like tiny eddies inside a greater current. You might imagine them as ribbons inside a breeze, or small leaves turning within a greater whirl of water. They are graceful and ephemeral. Some last only seconds. Some complete a full loop around the core. Others vanish before they are even noticed. But while they exist, they move in harmony, spaced apart by the invisible rhythm of the storm. From above, it's like watching a celestial clock. From within, it is balance in motion. These smaller vortices can form when the tornado's core is wide and strong, when the rotation is organized, and the air is focused but generous with its energy. The main tornado provides the environment, and within that space, the atmosphere tries out new shapes, tiny spirals born of the same breath. Radar can sometimes capture these patterns, revealing small, tight circulations, moving within the broader spin. Photographs, when timed just right, show slender tendrils twisting around a central trunk. Sometimes 2, sometimes 4, occasionally more. But tonight, we don't need instruments. We simply sit in the tall grass as the wind hums low. We watch the funnel pass at a safe distance, and we see Not one tornado, but many turning together, each in quiet orbit, never breaking the dance. You might think of them as partners in a slow waltz. Each knows the path. Each responds to the others. Their curves are smooth, their motion soft and fluid. Even as they move quickly, spinning tightly, they never appear rushed. They seem to float within the structure of the larger storm, as if drawn by gentle strings. Some multiple vortex tornadoes are visible from the start. Others only reveal themselves briefly, during the middle of the storm's life. And still, others appear only at the end, as the main tornado begins to stretch and fade, its structure loosening, its balance softening. No matter when they arrive, they are fleeting, but beautiful. They remind us that the atmosphere is full of surprises, not always loud, not always large. Sometimes, the most intricate patterns happen quietly, inside the folds of something bigger. These little vortices do not fight the storm. They belong to it. They are part of its breath, part of its rhythm, and as we watch them fade, as they dissolve into the air, we're left with a feeling of wonder, that even inside something as powerful as a tornado, there can be elegance, cooperation, even grace. Let's hold on to that, because soon the storm will begin to let go. The winds will stretch, the spiral will loosen, but first, one last moment of dance. Let's drift onward, to the soft unwinding. Sometimes, the sky creates more than one spiral, not within a single funnel, not as threads dancing inside a larger vortex, but beside it, following, wandering, orbiting gently, like a small moon drawn to the quiet gravity of a larger world. These are called satellite tornadoes, and tonight we observe one as it drifts calmly near the edge of a supercell's wide breath, not competing, not colliding, but softly existing, just alongside. Satellite tornadoes are rare, but when they form, they are among the most graceful features in the dance of the atmosphere. They are not born from the same circulation as the main tornado. They do not emerge from the same funnel. Instead, they form independently, nearby but separate, pulled into motion by the same forces, shaped by the same wind shear and lift, but moving with their own delicate rhythm. Imagine a wide, powerful supercell slowly crossing a field. At its core, a tall tornado rotates, steady, mature, present. But just outside its reach, a smaller spiral begins to form. It twists gently, almost shyly, not within the parent circulation, but beside it. This is the satellite. Its movement is soft, often curved, often trailing behind or gliding to the side. It may orbit slowly around the main tornado, or it may follow a winding path just outside the core flow of the storm. Its existence is temporary, its presence quiet, but for a moment it accompanies the larger storm. From above, the two spirals may look like partners in motion, one wide, one narrow, each spinning with care, neither disturbing the other. And though they're born of separate circulations, their timing is rarely coincidence. The supercell structure, the inflow, the rear flank downdraft, the deep mesocyclone creates an environment where new rotation can develop nearby, where smaller zones of twist and lift can organize just enough to breathe into a second form. Satellite tornadoes are often brief. Some last only a minute. Some never fully mature. They may be slim, winding, rope-like, or they may have a sturdy funnel of their own. But always, they seem to move in respect, gravitating toward the larger vortex, turning in soft arcs, trailing like a companion cloud. They do not merge, they do not overtake. They simply share space for a little while. You can think of them as the atmosphere's way of echoing its own pattern. a smaller swirl born from the same sheet of sky, but given its own voice, its own step in the choreography. From the ground, they may appear suddenly. One moment, only the main tornado. The next, a second form appearing off to the side, carving its own path through the grass, then vanishing just as quietly. And then the sky returns to one. Tonight, we rest in this moment of twinning, of balance, of nearby motion. We watch the satellite tornado drift slowly near its taller companion, not as a rival, but as a quiet friend. Like the moon that reflects the glow of something larger, a satellite tornado moves not to shine on its own, but to trace the same story in miniature. Let's follow its curve as it leans back into the air, as it unwinds, as it fades, because soon the whole storm will begin to loosen, and the tornado will let go. All storms begin, and all storms, in time, come to a close. Not with a sudden stop, but with a soft letting go. Tornadoes are no different. They may stretch, they may spin, they may roam for minutes or miles, but eventually the balance shifts, the rhythm slows, and the spiral begins to fade. Tonight, we'll sit quietly with that moment, the moment of ending, not as collapse, but as return, as the sky easing back into stillness. A tornado, like all atmospheric motion, is held together by ingredients: warm inflow, strong wind shear, an organized updraft, and focused rotation. When these pieces align, the storm finds structure. It lifts, it turns, it becomes. But when even one of those elements begins to fade, the spiral can no longer hold. Sometimes, the inflow weakens. The warm, moist air that once fed the storm slows its journey toward the cloud. Perhaps the air cools at the surface, or the landscape no longer offers enough fuel. Without that breath, the storm begins to starve. Other times, the wind shear softens. The careful difference in wind speed and direction with height, the guiding hand of the rotation, begins to flatten. Without that tilt, the spiral loses its shape, the dance unravels, and often the updraft tilts too far or is overcome by the downdraft, and the balance between rising and falling air begins to falter. You can think of it as the storm breathing out, but no longer breathing in. At first, the tornado may stretch. The funnel becomes longer, thinner, its shape growing more fragile. Its spiral softens, its core begins to wobble. It leans, then sways, then lifts. What once turned with precision now unwinds like a loose thread. The air no longer rises with strength. The rotation broadens, then slows. And just like that, the tornado is gone. Not with a bang, not with a crack, but with an exhale. The cloud above continues moving. The storm may still rain, it may still rumble, but the spiral below has ended. Meteorologists call this the dissipation stage. A phase when the visible funnel fades, when the rotation at the surface becomes stretched and weak, when the storm has decided to let go. On radar, the signs are subtle. The tight couplets of wind drift apart. The signal softens. The heart of the storm slows its beat. From the ground, it may look like a rope tornado unraveling, or simply a disappearing column, lifting skyward, leaving only drifting dust or bending grass behind. But to us, it's more than a technical shift. It's a return. A tornado's ending is the atmosphere resetting itself. Calm returning to the air. Energy folding gently back into the sky. And when the winds are finally still, when the ground is quiet again, you can feel the hush of a process completed, the hush of the sky exhaling. There's no applause, no echo, just stillness. We sit here now, in that stillness, not mourning the end, but honoring the full shape of the story. The tornado has formed. It has wandered. It has spun in spirals large and small. And now it has rested. The wind slows, the clouds drift, and the world waits. There's beauty in beginnings, but there's peace in endings too. So let's breathe with the sky now, gently, quietly, as the storm folds back into the clouds that carried it. The rotation has let go, the spiral has unspooled, and the night prepares to close. But before it does, there's one more kind of tornado to see, one that only reveals itself when the lights go out. Let's wait for the dark and listen for lightning. Some storms choose the cover of night. They move not in sunlight, but through the hush of darkness, where clouds blend with sky and shape becomes shadow. Tonight, we drift into this quiet realm, where tornadoes form after sundown, and their only signature is light. These are nighttime tornadoes, and while the science behind them is no different, the same warm inflow, the same rotating updraft, the same balance of lift and wind shear, their presence feels entirely different, more secret, more still, more like a whisper in the dark. The most noticeable difference is visibility. By day, a tornado may be outlined against a field or a blue-grey sky. It casts shadows. It draws light to itself. But at night, those cues disappear. The horizon fades, the clouds darken, and the funnel, if one forms, becomes nearly invisible. Unless lightning speaks, it doesn't flash constantly. It arrives in pulses, brief and brilliant, cutting across the cloud canopy with branching arms of electricity. And in that brief second of light, the tornado is revealed. Just for a moment, just one flicker, a silhouette in motion. You may see its curve, its lean, its base touching the ground, outlined in silver, then gone. The mind remembers it after the light fades, but the eyes must wait for the next flash. This is how the sky tells its story at night, with fragments, with glimpses, with soft clues scattered between moments of stillness. You might hear the wind before you ever see the shape, a distant hum, the rustling of leaves pulling in one direction, the far-off rattle of trees, bending in a rhythm not their own. Sometimes, the only sign is the glow of power lines blinking out, or the gentle spin of dust lifted by unseen rotation. And in rural places, where the land is wide and open, the storm moves like a shadow over fields, its breath felt, its presence sensed, but its body veiled in darkness. Meteorologists rely on radar at night, on signatures in the wind, on velocity scans that show the rotation, even when the eye cannot. But here, we rely on imagination. Let's lie in the soft grass beneath a moonless sky. The storm is far enough away to feel safe, but close enough to hear its low voice. We wait. A flash. There, on the horizon, a funnel appears. Curved, wide, still turning. Then darkness. Another flash. Now it's shifted, leaning, narrowing, drifting to the side. Then stillness again. In between, we listen to the crickets, to the rustle of leaves, to the breath of the air just before it changes. Night doesn't stop tornadoes. It simply softens them, cloaks them, turns them into shapes glimpsed in passing, like dreams half remembered when we wake. And perhaps there's something beautifully fitting about that. Tornadoes have always belonged more to mystery than to clarity. They are motion without edges, form without permanence, stories made of wind, and at night they become stories told in flashes. So we don't chase, we don't shine bright lights, we simply watch and wait and listen for the flash, for the outline, for the sky revealing itself one moment at a time. Nighttime tornadoes don't arrive with spectacle. They arrive in silence, outlined only by the sky's own flickering voice. And then they pass, back into the dark. Let's stay with that hush a little longer, because next we'll return to the beginning, to the place where air waits patiently for warmth to return, and for the sky to begin again. There are places where the land stretches so wide, you feel as though the earth itself has exhaled. No buildings, no clutter, only grass and wind and the endless sky above. Tonight, we visit these spaces, the open plains, where some tornadoes choose to wander. Out here, everything moves slowly. Time loosens its grip. The air feels unburdened, and when a storm arrives, it is not crowded by the noise of cities or roads. It is free to move at its own pace. Tornadoes over open plains are among the most poetic sights the atmosphere can offer. They can be seen from miles away, dark shapes moving gently against pale skies. No rush, no roar, just the slow passage of a spiral across a canvas of grass and light. Let's imagine we are lying in that tall grass now. The sun is low, casting amber light across the horizon. The sky above is vast and textured, grey with hints of blue and silver. And far in the distance, a funnel begins to lower. You can see it clearly. There are no trees to block the view, no buildings to interrupt the skyline, just the soft curve of earth and the slow tilt of the tornado descending. It touches down gently, and then it begins to move. Not quickly, not urgently. It turns with purpose, but without speed, carving a quiet path through fields that wave and bend with the breeze. This is the kind of tornado that seems to breathe with the land. Its rotation is steady, its motion unhurried. From a safe distance, it is mesmerizing. The grass ripples as it passes. The wind changes direction, drawn inward, then let go. There's a hum in the air, but no violence, only movement. In places like Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, the central plains of North America, these scenes unfold in spring and early summer. The terrain is flat, allowing air masses to meet without interference. Moisture from the Gulf, dry air from the west, lift from the warming sun, and wind shear sweeping overhead. The ingredients gather, not in chaos, but in harmony. And when the balance is right, a tornado may form, not with a scream, but with a soft descending spiral. Meteorologists appreciate these settings. They can observe from afar. Radar has a clean view. Photographers have space to frame the storm against the fading light. Even the tornado seems to enjoy the openness, turning slowly, stretching wide, sometimes even pausing in place as it leans gently across the horizon. It may grow large or remain narrow. It may drift for minutes or for many miles. And all the while, the land listens. Out here, the sounds carry farther. The distant rumble of thunder rolls for miles. The wind sings through tall grass, and the tornado's motion becomes a part of the landscape. Not an interruption, but a continuation. Eventually, the storm begins to weaken. The inflow fades, the spiral leans and loosens, and the funnel lifts, vanishing slowly into the sky. What remains is stillness and grass, bending softly in the breeze. Tonight, we remember that tornadoes don't always arrive in cities or chaos. Sometimes they visit the quiet places, and in those places, they move like wind given shape, graceful, wandering, never in a hurry. Let's hold that image now, as we move from the field into the realm of invisible sight. Because, while our eyes may see spirals in the sky, there are tools that see rotation before it ever forms. Let's explore one of those next. Radar. There are times when the sky holds secrets, when rotation begins, not where the eye can see, but far away, high above the trees, inside a cloud that hasn't yet spoken. And yet, we still see it, not with vision, but with radar. Tonight, we drift into the gentle world of invisible sight, how we observe tornadoes long before they form, through quiet signals and echoes in the air. Radar doesn't look like our eyes do. It doesn't see shapes or color or shadow. Instead, it listens. It sends out pulses, gentle beams of radio waves, and waits for them to return. These pulses move outward from a radar dome, spreading into the sky like expanding rings in still water. When they meet something, a raindrop, a snowflake, a gust of wind, they bounce back. And from that echo, a picture begins to form. Not a photograph, not a painting, but something softer, something more subtle, a map of motion, a texture of return. And inside that map, we can see the wind itself. This is what's called Doppler radar, a quiet tool that measures the direction and speed of movement in the air. It can tell if raindrops are drifting away or drawing inward, if winds are spreading out or spinning in. It can reveal rotation hidden within a cloud, long before a funnel begins to stretch down. Let's imagine now we are gently hovering in the radar dome itself. The equipment hums softly. Outside, the sky is grey and layered. A storm forms miles away, too far to see with the eye. But here, with radar, we begin to listen. A scan sweeps across the horizon. It hears small differences, winds moving in opposite directions, close together. That's a sign of rotation, a tender spiral forming, perhaps thousands of feet above the Earth. This signature is called a velocity couplet, a pair of colors on a radar screen, one showing wind moving toward the radar, the other showing wind moving away. Together, they paint the gentle fingerprint of a turning column, a mesocyclone. Sometimes, radar sees this long before any tornado forms. And sometimes, if rotation nears the surface and lifts dust or debris, radar detects that too. It doesn't scream, it doesn't alarm, it simply draws the story. A new shape appears on the screen, a swirl of returns, denser than rain, more grounded than cloud. This may be a tornado touching down, its presence confirmed not by eye, but by the shape of the air it moves. And still, radar watches. It scans every few minutes. It builds a time-lapse of the storm's life, tracking its motion, measuring its breath. Meteorologists, tucked safely in quiet offices, study these screens. They read the mood of the storm through this invisible language. And when rotation strengthens, when the signs begin to align, they may issue a warning. But even the warning is a form of care, a soft signal, a thoughtful heads-up, an offering of time and space to prepare. And then the storm moves on. The radar pulses continue, always listening, always gently looking for movement, for change, for breath. Tonight, we honor this silent watcher, this quiet sight, the way we can sense what our eyes cannot, the way the sky tells its secrets if we learn how to hear them. Let's drift now from signals to stories, because long before radar, long before we could see the air, people watched the skies with instinct alone. Let's return there, to where tornado forecasting began, not with code, but with wonder. Before there were satellites, before radar swept the sky in spirals of invisible light, before models and data and color-coded warnings, there were only clouds and people quietly watching them. Tonight, we drift through the gentle history of tornado forecasting, a journey that began not in laboratories, but on porches, in fields, beneath open skies. In those early days, the idea of predicting tornadoes felt impossible, too sudden, too mysterious, too dangerous. And for a long time, in many places, even saying the word tornado on the radio was discouraged, as if speaking it aloud might stir the sky itself. People learned through experience. Farmers watched for green-tinted clouds. Pilots noted sudden shifts in wind. Children grew up knowing what stillness meant, the hush before something began to turn. They read the atmosphere like a mood, not in numbers, but in feeling. But even then, science was quietly listening. In the early 20th century, meteorologists began collecting observations, temperature, pressure, wind direction, writing them down by hand, drawing surface maps with soft, pencil lines that curved like the fronts they described. And little by little, patterns began to emerge. By the 1940s, a few pioneering scientists began to speak carefully of possibilities. At a base in Oklahoma in 1948, two Air Force meteorologists, Ernest Forbush and Robert Miller, noticed conditions that reminded them of a recent tornado. They issued a forecast, and a tornado came. It was the first known successful tornado prediction in the United States. Still, official tornado forecasting took time to become accepted. The atmosphere was complex, and storms didn't always follow rules. But the tools were evolving. Balloon soundings reached higher into the sky, measuring temperature and humidity at every level. Radar began to detect rotation deep inside clouds. Computers learned to simulate the atmosphere in thousands of tiny boxes, forecasting not certainty, but possibility. And so, what began in whispers grew into quiet confidence. By the 1970s and 80s, the first tornado watches and warnings were being issued regularly. People began to trust the signs, to recognize the value of a few minutes' notice. And meteorologists, those calm voices in the storm, became trusted guides. Today, tornado forecasting blends instinct and science. We still watch the skies, we still feel the wind, but now we also read from satellites orbiting quietly above the Earth. We interpret Doppler radar, track supercells across states, and use ensemble models, many forecasts at once, to understand what might come next. It's not about predicting with perfection, it's about seeing the signs, about preparing gently, about understanding what the sky might want to do before it does it. The forecasts themselves remain calm, never alarming, just soft probabilities, percentages, outlooks with care built in. And when the day is quiet, when no tornadoes form, that too is a success. The storm respected its balance. The sky stayed still. So tonight, we honor those who listen to the wind not with fear, but with focus. Those who rise early to review the models. Those who stay late to issue a watch. Those who speak softly into microphones so that others may feel calm even when the clouds begin to turn. Forecasting is not about knowing. It's about sensing. It's about caring enough to wonder and wondering enough to watch. And so we return to the present, where the sky above us is full of signals. Some seen, some felt. Let's lie back now, under this quiet ceiling of stars and shifting clouds, and listen. Because every forecast begins with a question. What might the sky want to say next? If you've ever stepped outside and felt the air press gently against your skin, a warmth that feels full, a breeze that carries weight, you've felt the quiet presence of dew point. Not just humidity, but a sign, a whisper from the atmosphere, telling us how ready it is to lift, to form clouds, to turn. Tonight, we listen to dew points, not as numbers, but as gentle signals, soft clues that the sky may be willing to build, to rise, and perhaps, if the balance is right, to spin. Dew point is the temperature at which air must be cooled for condensation to begin, for invisible moisture to become visible cloud. The higher the dew point, the more moisture is in the air. And moisture is one of the quiet fuels of storm development. When the dew point is low, the air is dry. Clouds may struggle to form. Lifted air cools quickly, but without enough moisture to condense, there's little energy to be shared. But when the dew point is high, 65, 70 degrees Fahrenheit or more, the air feels different. It feels soft, heavy, full of potential. It's not uncomfortable in our dreamy journey. It's comforting, like air that has something to offer. This moisture, gently held in the lower layers of the atmosphere, becomes available when warm air begins to rise. And as it lifts, the vapor condenses into tiny droplets, clouds forming quietly in the sky's palm. This process releases latent heat, a soft warmth that helps the air continue to rise, even higher, even more freely. Dew point doesn't cause tornadoes, but it's one of the earliest signs that the sky might be ready to move. It's a kind of agreement between the earth and the atmosphere. You give me warmth and water, and I will give you motion. Let's imagine now an open field in spring. The sun has warmed the soil. Moisture from the ground rises gently into the air, and soon the dew point climbs, like a signal, not of danger, but of readiness. Meteorologists use dew points as part of the larger forecast puzzle. They look at surface maps, at temperature and wind, but the dew point always has its place. A high dew point means more available moisture, more rising clouds, more fuel for gentle lift. And if the wind shear is there, if the instability is right, rotation may have what it needs. But still, dew points are quiet. They don't arrive with urgency. They don't demand attention. They simply sit, softly present in the lower atmosphere, waiting to be lifted, waiting to be transformed. Sometimes we watch the dew point depression, the difference between air temperature and dew point. A smaller gap means the air is already near saturation, and that means the cloud base, the place where storms begin, might be low enough for rotation to reach the ground. Lower cloud bases, higher moisture, a better chance for quiet connection. But we don't rush there. We simply observe, feel the moisture on our skin. Notice how the breeze carries more weight than usual. And remember, dew points are not forecasts. They are hints, like a hush before a word, a softness before the rise. So tonight, we hold that feeling, that gentle fullness in the air, and we understand what it means. The sky is preparing, the atmosphere is watching, and the moisture is quietly in place. Let's rise with it into the next measure of potential, not a force, but a permission. Not all energy is loud. Not all power roars. Some of it waits quietly, stored in the stillness of the sky, ready not to explode, but to lift. Tonight, we're floating into a soft concept known as CAPE, Convective Available Potential Energy, a long name for something beautifully simple. CAPE is the atmosphere's quiet invitation to rise. It's not a push, not a command. It's a kind of permission, granted to warm air that wants to float upward through the layers of the sky. Let's imagine now a small parcel of air resting near the surface. It's warm, moist, and lighter than the air above it. As the sun warms the ground, that parcel begins to lift. The higher it goes, the cooler the air around it becomes. If that surrounding air is cooler than the rising parcel, then the parcel keeps rising, gently, steadily, like a balloon let go in a quiet room. Cap measures how freely that parcel is allowed to float. You can think of it as the difference between the rising air's temperature and the temperature of the air around it. The greater that difference, the more easily the air will continue its journey upward, without interruption, without resistance. In meteorology, CAPE is measured in joules per kilogram, but we don't need to hold on to numbers tonight. We only need to feel the atmosphere's readiness. A high CAPE value means the sky is filled with buoyant potential. It's not unstable in a dramatic sense, but quietly open to motion. The air is light, the layers are prepared, and upward movement is gently encouraged. Storms formed in high CAPE environments often build tall, their clouds stretching deeply into the sky, forming towers of vapor that churn not with rage, but with purpose. These storms may eventually rotate if other ingredients, like wind shear and moisture, are also present. But tonight, we're simply focusing on the lift, the calm rise, the soft journey from ground to cloud. Picture a calm spring afternoon, a field warmed by sunlight, dew on blades of grass quietly rising into the air. That's CAPE at work. Not yet a storm, not even a cloud, just permission, a signal that the sky is willing to allow the gentle transfer of energy. CAPE can vary with time and place. In the early morning, it may be low, as the air is cooler and the surface still resting. But as the day warms, the values may increase. It's a conversation between Earth and atmosphere. One breathes upward, and the other opens its arms. Meteorologists use CAPE to help understand storm potential, not to predict outcomes, but to read the sky's mood. It's one piece in the quiet puzzle of forecasting, alongside dew points, wind profiles, and cloud bases. A storm may form in high CAPE and remain peaceful. Or, given the right combination of other elements, it may slowly begin to turn. But CAPE on its own is simply energy, waiting, softly held, and even when nothing happens, that potential lingers like a yawn not yet taken, a breeze not yet blown. So tonight, we rest with it. The invisible lift, the slow warmth that wants to rise, the readiness that doesn't rush. Let it float upward in your imagination, higher and higher, until it meets the place where clouds begin. Because up there, something delicate happens. Vapor becomes visible. Let's meet that boundary next, where invisibility turns to form, the lifting condensation level. Every cloud has a beginning, but it doesn't start with a storm. It starts with a quiet transformation, when something invisible becomes softly seen. Tonight, we rise slowly into that boundary, the lifting condensation level, or LCL. It's the gentle height where rising air cools just enough to let vapor become cloud. This isn't a sudden moment. There's no line you can see from the ground, no sound, no flicker, no flare. It's a silent crossing. Let's drift upward now, from the warm surface below, through a soft column of rising air. This air began its journey near the ground, warmed gently by the sun, and moistened by dew evaporating from grass, soil, and leaves. It's carrying invisible water vapor, tucked quietly into its molecules. As the parcel of air rises, it begins to cool, not because it touches colder air, but because it expands. The higher it goes, the lower the pressure, and like a balloon inflating, it spreads out and cools. At first, nothing changes. The vapor remains hidden. But then, at a specific height, the temperature of the air reaches its dew point, and something soft happens. The vapor can no longer stay invisible. tiny droplets begin to form. Not rain, not mist, but cloud. A delicate collection of microdroplets, so small they float, so light they drift. And that moment, that elevation in the atmosphere, is the lifting condensation level. It is, quite literally, where the cloud begins. Not with noise, but with surrender. The air gives up its hidden moisture, and in return receives shape, form, visibility. From the ground, this is where the base of a cumulus cloud appears. Flat-bottomed, gentle-edged, a soft ceiling, marking the height at which the air became visible. In tornado forecasting, the LCL tells meteorologists how high this base sits, and that height matters, because a lower LCL means the cloud base is closer to the ground. When the cloud base is low, any rotation that forms inside the storm doesn't have far to reach downward. It can more easily stretch toward the surface, and, if other ingredients are in place, form a tornado. But even here, we speak not of risk, only of readiness. A low LCL doesn't cause a tornado. It simply opens the door. It shortens the path between sky and soil. And when the LCL is high, the path is longer and the connection less likely. But beyond storm potential, the LCL offers something else. A quiet reminder that the invisible becomes visible when conditions are just right. That something soft and unseen can take form without force. That all it takes is patience and lift and a moment of cool stillness. As we watch the clouds build from the earth, we can imagine that exact point, that line in the air where form begins. It's not fixed. It changes with temperature, humidity, and time of day. But it is always there, waiting. So next time you gaze up at a cumulus cloud, know that you're looking at the LCL, the line where the sky decided to show itself. And in our quiet study of tornadoes, this is one of the most peaceful stops along the journey. The moment when potential becomes presence, when the sky begins to reveal what it holds. From here, things may continue to build, or they may simply drift, but the foundation has formed in silence, in softness, in balance. Let's pause here a moment longer, just under the cloud base, and when you're ready, we'll continue upward toward the next layer of motion and memory in the sky. Before a storm rises, before a cloud is born, there is often a quiet stillness held in the sky, a pause, a softness, a subtle restraint. Tonight, we rest with CEN, convective inhibition, a gentle cap in the atmosphere's design. Not a barrier made of force, but a soft lid. Like a blanket laid calmly over the sky, CEN prevents warm air from rising too soon, too fast, too freely. And in doing so, it gives the sky time to think. Let's drift into this idea and feel how peaceful prevention can be. Imagine a parcel of warm, moist air resting near the surface. It's ready to rise, light and buoyant, filled with energy and moisture. But something above it says, not just yet. This resistance doesn't feel like a wall. It's more like a gentle hesitation, a layer of slightly warmer, drier air above the surface that keeps things still. That layer is CEN at work. It's not unkind. It's not threatening. It's simply the sky saying, wait. Because sometimes waiting is what builds beauty, what creates structure, what allows a storm, when it does finally form, to be more organized and more purposeful. CEN is often strongest in the early parts of the day. The sun has begun to warm the surface, but the air above may still carry cooler, drier layers from the night. As that dry layer sits quietly above, it resists the rise of warm air below, and so the surface parcels collect warmth and wait. This is important for supercells, the rotating thunderstorms that may eventually produce tornadoes. Without CIN, warm air might rise quickly, scattering into many small, disorganized clouds. But with CN in place, the atmosphere holds back, gathering energy, storing potential. And then, when enough surface warmth builds, when the lower atmosphere becomes sufficiently buoyant, that inhibition begins to break. The cap lifts, the sky exhales, and the energy, now focused and refined, rises in a smooth, singular motion. It's like the moment before a yawn, when the breath is held and then released. Meteorologists look for CN when analyzing storm potential. If it's too strong, storms may never form at all. If it's too weak, they may form early, disorganized, scattered, brief. But when CIN is just right, a gentle but breakable cap, it creates the perfect pause, a waiting space, a moment of calm before the lift. Think of it like holding a teacup just beneath the surface of warm water. There's tension, but it's soft, and then, at just the right moment, it rises. CIN reminds us that stillness is not empty. It is preparation, and it plays a quiet role in shaping what may come next. In storm forecasting, we often pair CIN with CAPE, energy and restraint, permission and pause. Together, they choreograph the dance of the atmosphere. But tonight, we stay in the calm, in the place where lift is not yet allowed, where the sky holds its breath and the clouds wait their turn. Let's stay here for just a little while longer, under this gentle cap. No rush, no urgency, only the stillness before the rise. And when the time comes, when the sky is softly ready, we'll drift with it into new boundaries where air masses meet. The dry line awaits. Some boundaries are loud, but not the dry line. This one arrives in silence, a quiet shift in the sky, a meeting place where two different kinds of air breathe past each other gently. Tonight, we stand in the hush of this subtle edge, a line not drawn on the ground, but softly stitched through the atmosphere. It's called a dry line, and it's not sharp, not harsh, not even always visible. But it is important. It's where moist air from the Gulf of Mexico meets dry air from the desert southwest. And though they touch, they do not mix easily. They press and slide, like soft currents moving beside one another. Let's imagine this together. On one side of the dry line, moisture hangs in the air, soft, humid, and thick. You might feel it on your skin, like a gentle weight in the breeze. And on the other side, the air is drier, lighter, more distant feeling, as if it has traveled far without picking up much along the way. Where these two meet, the atmosphere becomes alert, not with urgency, but with possibility. This is often where storms begin, because the dry air, being denser and slightly cooler, acts like a soft wedge, sliding beneath the moist air and lifting it slowly upward. And when moist air is lifted, clouds can form, instability can build, rotation may gently begin, but again, there's no rush. The dry line moves with the warmth of the day, shifting eastward under the afternoon sun, then settling back as the night cools. It's a living edge, breathing in and out, retreating and advancing like the tide of the sky. Meteorologists often watch dry lines in the spring, especially across the central plains of the United States, where this meeting of air masses is common. It's here, in places like Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, that the dry line becomes a stage. One where supercells sometimes form, where tornadoes may gently begin their path. But even when no storms rise, the dry line is still something beautiful, a moment of contrast, a balancing act. You might notice it in the way the wind changes, from soft and southerly to quiet and westerly. You might feel it in the air's embrace, first damp and warm, then suddenly dry and spacious. It's not a wall, not a front. It's more like a whisper, a suggestion that things are not quite the same on either side. And in the sleepy rhythm of weather, the dry line reminds us that not all meetings need to end in storms. Sometimes, two differences can exist side by side, moving slowly through the evening, never clashing, never forcing a change, just passing, just present. Tonight, we rest along this boundary where moisture breathes on one side and desert air drifts on the other, where the sky listens to two separate stories told at once. And as we linger in this quiet place, you may notice a calm forming in you too, as if your thoughts, like the air, have found a soft place to meet and continue. Let's walk with this breeze a little while longer, and then, as gently as the atmosphere itself, we'll explore how humans respond to the sky's quiet signals. Not in fear, but in preparation. Next, we'll listen to how meteorologists softly alert the world when something may form, a gentle guide to tornado watches and warnings. In the quiet world of weather, there are times when the sky sends signs, not to startle us, but to gently say, I might be thinking of something. Tonight, we settle into the soft space between what might be and what already is. This is where meteorologists offer watches and warnings, not as alarms, but as calm signals, guiding lights, whispers of readiness. Let's begin with the tornado watch. A watch is like a gentle heads up, a way of saying conditions are present. The ingredients are nearby. Something could form, but it hasn't yet. When a tornado watch is issued, the atmosphere is in a state of quiet possibility. Moisture, instability, wind shear, and lift may all be aligned, like puzzle pieces on a table, waiting to be placed together. But the puzzle isn't finished. The tornado hasn't arrived. The clouds haven't made their decision. In that moment, the watch invites us to be present with the atmosphere, to listen, to observe, to understand that the sky may be preparing something, or it may simply drift on, peacefully unchanging. A tornado warning, on the other hand, is softer than it sounds. It doesn't shout. It doesn't frighten. It simply means that a tornado has either been seen by eyes on the ground or through radar's invisible touch, and now the atmosphere is no longer thinking, it's acting. The warning is given not as fear, but as focus, a moment to be aware, to quietly move toward shelter with calm and care, like preparing for a nighttime rain. Meteorologists are gentle interpreters of the sky. They read radar loops not as chaos, but as stories unfolding. Slowly, they listen to atmospheric pressure, observe wind profiles, and translate all of it into language we can understand. Watches and warnings are that language. They are spoken in tones of trust, and even in their seriousness, they can carry softness. Because the purpose is not panic, it is peace through preparation. Let's take a moment to imagine the radar screen, a quiet map of color and motion. Blues, greens, yellows, echoes of raindrops and drifting wind. When certain patterns emerge, tight spirals, bowing lines, or hooks near the edge of a storm, meteorologists take a breath. They look again, and when they feel the moment has arrived, they issue a warning, calmly, clearly, with care. There is grace in this system, a human watching a machine watching the sky. Each signal is a gift of time, a cushion of minutes to prepare a quiet space, to listen to the atmosphere's slow decisions. And when the storm passes, as they always do, the watches are lifted, the warnings expire, and the sky returns to itself, no longer thinking, no longer acting, just breathing. So, as we rest here, between understanding and imagination, know that the sky speaks gently. Even in its most complex moments, it never rushes to reveal. It tells us what we need, when we need it, in calm signs and soft alerts. Let's hold that truth as we drift. The storm doesn't come without notice, and the people who watch the skies do so with great care. You're safe here. Now, we leave the world of watches and warnings behind and begin a quieter journey into the myths and memories that shape how we've always seen tornadoes. Next, we explore the folklore of the wind. There's something ancient about the wind. Long before satellites spun silently above the earth, before radar hummed gently in hidden towers, people watched the skies with only their eyes and listened to storms with only their hearts. And from those quiet observations came stories, tales passed down like lullabies, tied to wonder, awe, and sometimes mystery. Tonight, we drift softly into those tales. We'll hold them carefully, not to dismiss, but to gently understand, and to let the science settle in, like soft rain falling on old soil. Let's begin with a common myth that tornadoes avoid rivers, hills, or cities. It's a comforting idea, the thought that landscape might protect us, that a stream, a ridge, or a row of buildings could tell the sky, not here. But the atmosphere, it doesn't follow maps. Air flows where it's guided by temperature, pressure, and wind. Tornadoes have crossed rivers, climbed hills, and moved through cities, not out of defiance, but simply because the conditions allowed them to form and drift. Still, the myth lingers, and perhaps there's a softness in understanding where it came from. In the past, places spared by tornadoes may have woven the story as a way to feel safe, to feel held by their surroundings. Another myth whispers that opening a window during a tornado will equalize the pressure and save a house from damage. A quiet gesture, born of logic, but not one backed by meteorology. In truth, air pressure inside and outside changes too swiftly for a window to make a difference. And opening one may only invite in debris or wind that doesn't knock first. Still, the idea reflects something gentle, a desire to interact with the storm, to do something, to make peace with what's coming. Let's turn now to the thought that tornadoes only come during the day. In many minds, they arrive with boiling skies and dramatic light. But the truth is, tornadoes can form under moonlight. They are not bound by our clocks. Some of the quietest, most powerful storms have touched down under the hush of midnight, lit only by distant lightning and scattered starlight. It's a poetic notion that even as we sleep, the atmosphere continues its conversations. One more myth floats gently by, that the eye of the tornado is calm. But unlike a hurricane, a tornado's center is not a defined, peaceful eye. There may be stillness near the core, a kind of surreal quiet, but it is fleeting, wrapped in tightly rotating air, and not a place to rest. And yet, the idea of a calm heart within the chaos is not without beauty. It reminds us that people have always looked for stillness inside the storm. We don't need to silence these stories. They are part of how we've connected with the sky. But now we blend them with understanding, with gentle science that explains not to scare, but to soothe. Each myth, softened by truth, becomes less of a warning and more of a window, a way to see the atmosphere more clearly. And maybe, as we lay beneath the ceiling of stars, we can feel a little closer to what the sky has always tried to tell us. Not in riddles, not in fear, but in quiet rhythms and soft returns to balance. In the next chapter, we leave the land and float over the sea to watch a tornado spin above calm waters. Let's drift there, gently. Some tornadoes do not form over land at all. They appear where the sky meets the sea, rising quietly above gentle waves, twisting slowly in the misty distance. These are waterspouts. Tonight, we'll drift out over a still, moonlit bay. No sound but the lapping of water. No light but the soft shimmer of starlight on the surface. And then, just ahead, a spiral begins to descend. Not violently, not suddenly, but like a ribbon unrolling from the clouds, thin and silver, delicate as breath. Waterspouts are cousins of land tornadoes, but they speak with a different rhythm. Most waterspouts are called fair weather waterspouts, and they form beneath cumulus clouds, those cottony shapes that rise gently into the sky on warm, humid days. The air at the surface is often calm, but quietly unstable. Moisture lingers in the lower atmosphere, and gentle lift causes columns of air to rise. Then, rotation begins. A swirl, born from light winds, begins to spin vertically. And when the conditions are just right, a funnel appears, touching the water softly, not to stir chaos, but to reflect the dance of air above. From a distance, it's a beautiful thing to witness, a solitary spiral gliding across open water, its reflection shimmering on the waves below. There's rarely thunder, there's rarely urgency, only movement and a rhythm of water and wind becoming one. Now, not all waterspouts are gentle. Some are tornadic waterspouts, formed when a land-based tornado moves over water. These are stronger, born from powerful storms, and more like the supercell tornadoes we explore on land. But even then, their path over water feels slower. The energy softens as it glides across the surface, leaving only ripples and spirals in its wake. Let's imagine that now. You're standing on the edge of a quiet pier. The air is thick with salt and warmth. The sky, painted with low-hanging clouds, stretches wide and silent. Far out over the horizon, you see a funnel begin to lower. It meets the sea so gently that the water rises up to greet it, spraying mist, spinning foam. It's like watching a thread pull downward, stitched softly into the ocean's skin. And then it passes. No crash, no roar, just a returning quiet, as if the sea and sky had agreed to dance for a moment, and then part peacefully. Waterspouts can form almost anywhere there's warm water, and just the right blend of calm and instability. The Florida Keys see them often. So do parts of the Mediterranean, and lakes too, where warm summer days make the air restless, but not rushed. For mariners and boaters, waterspouts are something to notice, but they are often short-lived, and many drift away without touching anything but open water. There's something poetic about that, a tornado that leaves no mark, only memory. In ancient times, sailors told stories of sea serpents and sky ropes, unsure what they were seeing. Today, we know them as gentle spirals of vapor and wind, nature's way of spinning energy in the softest of ways. And as we sail gently back from this chapter, let us carry the image with us, a slow turning column, reflected in moonlit water, dancing alone in the sea's embrace. Next, we turn toward land once more and discover that tornadoes aren't only found on the plains. Some live among trees, mountains, and even snow. When we think of tornadoes, our minds often drift to wide open fields, endless plains under endless skies, where clouds have room to gather and the wind has space to think. But the truth is softer and more surprising. Tornadoes are not bound by geography. They can form in places we might not expect. Among mountain ridges, beneath forest canopies, across snowy fields, and even near quiet coastlines, where the atmosphere is only just willing. Tonight, let's take a meandering path, leaving the flatlands behind and wandering into these quieter, less likely places, where spirals still occasionally spin. We begin in the mountains. It may seem unlikely that a tornado, with its delicate need for balance, could twist its way through steep slopes and narrow valleys. But it can. Though rare, tornadoes have found their way into mountain towns, descending into basins, gliding softly along ridgelines, navigating the terrain not with violence, but with adaptation. Air still rises, moisture still gathers, and the wind, despite the challenge of elevation, can still find just enough spin. In places like the Smoky Mountains, or even high-altitude valleys in the Rockies, tornadoes have touched down, their paths brief and meandering, but no less real. Now let's walk beneath the trees. In forested regions, the sky is often hidden, a patchwork of cloud glimpsed through branches, the air thick with the scent of pine and leaf. Here, tornadoes are quieter still. Their presence is masked, not by silence, but by softness. The swirling air dances above the treetops, its motion muffled by the canopy, its trail woven into the leaves. Observers may not even see the funnel at first, only the subtle bending of trunks, the stirring of branches in a pattern that feels unfamiliar, like the forest exhaling in a strange rhythm. Then it passes, and all is still once more. Even snow-covered regions, those places known more for stillness than storms, are not immune to rotation. Cold season tornadoes can occur when just the right combination of warm, moist air meets winter's lingering chill. A tornado over snow is a rare and almost surreal sight. A silver-grey funnel moving slowly across a field dusted with white, the flakes beneath it rising and swirling like feathers. It's a meeting of contrasts, the quiet of winter and the gentle twist of rising air. Yet even here, the tornado moves without haste, without spectacle. Just one more thread in the sky's long tapestry. And there are more unexpected places still. Coastal regions, where sea breezes interact with land heat. Urban zones, where concrete can fuel convection. Islands, where boundaries are smaller, but the sky above is just as deep. Tornadoes are not confined. They are possibilities, waiting for the right alignment, no matter the scenery below. And when they appear in these quieter corners of the world, they remind us of something simple and soft. The atmosphere is always listening, always turning, always able to surprise us with where it breathes. So, the next time you find yourself in the mountains, or under a forest canopy, or standing in a field wrapped in snow, remember that even here, the air holds stories. Spirals, moments of motion that come and go like dreams. As we continue our journey, we'll leave behind the forests and the hills and listen to the ground itself, how the earth's friction, subtle and slow, helps shape the storm's path. Some parts of the atmosphere follow no clock at all. Clouds form and fade. Rain comes and goes. Winds change their minds without asking the time. But some patterns are steadier, subtle, cyclical, and one of these quiet patterns is tornado season. Tonight, we'll drift through the calendar softly, not with urgency, but with observation, following the gentle heartbeat of the earth as it warms, breathes, and lifts. In North America, tornadoes most often arrive in spring, but they don't crash in like visitors. They whisper their way in, one warm front at a time. It begins with a subtle shift. March arrives with longer days, and the sun lingers just a little longer each afternoon. The ground, once quiet with winter's stillness, begins to warm from beneath. Moist air, drawn from the Gulf, starts drifting northward, slowly, like the season is testing the atmosphere's mood. By April, the air grows more willing. The temperature differences between north and south create broad, invisible tension. Cold air slips down from higher latitudes, while warm air glides upward from the south. Where they meet, a boundary forms, a meeting place. The sky listens. May is the soft crescendo. This is the peak of tornado season across much of the central US. The plains, the Midwest, the heart of what some call Tornado Alley. But even now, there is no need to picture chaos. Instead, imagine a wide blue sky slowly filling with moisture and energy, a landscape bathed in golden light while the air gathers and gently prepares. Not every day brings storms, not every cloud turns, but the atmosphere holds a readiness, like a pause before music begins. June keeps the rhythm going, but now the pattern starts to shift. The jet stream moves, storm tracks change course, and the dance of warm and cool begins to stretch toward the north. Places like the Dakotas and parts of Canada begin to feel the quiet pulse of the season. And then it fades. July arrives, and with it, the heat flattens things. Air becomes thick, but not eager. Storms still form, but they are slower, heavier. By August, the atmosphere grows tired. The long summer days press down, and the sharp contrasts needed for tornado formation begin to smooth out. But even then, the season is not entirely over. In the fall, a second, smaller wave can emerge. September and October sometimes carry enough contrast. A surprise cold front here, a lingering warmth there, and another round of storms can bloom. Not loud, not expected, but present. This gentle rhythm isn't confined to just one region. Each part of the world has its own seasonal song, its own timing, its own rise and fall. And in this chapter, we remember, tornado season is not a single event. It is a progression, a soft unfolding, a collaboration between the Earth's surface and the sky above. Meteorologists track this rhythm carefully, watching dew points rise, marking wind shear on charts, noting each silent signal. But for us, tonight, it is enough to simply feel the rhythm. The way spring invites movement, the way summer listens, the way the sky holds its breath and sometimes lets it go. As we close this chapter, we leave the calendar behind and float higher, above borders, above maps. Because tornadoes don't belong to just one land. They exist quietly across the globe, each with its own softness. Tornadoes don't speak just one language. They don't belong only to one place. Though the American plains may be the image most often held in mind, a solitary funnel twirling through golden fields beneath a sweeping sky, tornadoes quietly visit many parts of the world, each shaped by their own local breath of air. Tonight, we'll leave the borders behind. No passports needed, only a soft willingness to float through the atmosphere as it turns gently across continents. We begin where many stories start, the central United States. From Texas to Kansas, Oklahoma to Nebraska, this stretch of land has just the right ingredients. Warm, moist air from the Gulf, cool, dry air from the Rockies, and a high, meandering jet stream above. Here, the land is flat, allowing the air to layer, to rise and stretch without interruption. But this is only one version of the story. Cross the ocean, and you'll find the skies over Europe holding their own quiet power. In parts of France, Germany, Poland, and even Italy, tornadoes, called trombas or trombodaria, form softly between the folds of valleys, often in summer or early autumn. The ingredients are slightly different, but the melody is the same, an atmosphere ready to turn. Even in the United Kingdom, land of cool breezes and soft rains, tornadoes touch down from time to time, small and brief, often overlooked, but recorded with quiet curiosity. Africa, too, holds its share of spiraling skies. In South Africa, especially in the Highveld region, spring and summer storms bring rotation. Moisture from the Indian Ocean, lifted by terrain, gives rise to beautiful towering cumulonimbus, some of which begin to spin. In South America, Argentina holds a surprise. It's home to one of the most active tornado regions in the world. The Pampas, those wide, fertile lowlands, mimic the American plains in their openness, their clash of air masses, their invitation for the sky to swirl. In Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, the rhythm continues. Even across the vast continent of Asia, tornadoes find their place. Parts of Bangladesh and eastern India have seen powerful tornadoes, formed by strong convection in pre-monsoon heat. Though rare, when they do form, they move through fields with the same whispering voice. Australia, beneath its southern stars, hosts landspouts and twisters too, often during the warmer months, in regions where moist tropical air meets dry desert heat. And let us not forget the oceans. Waterspouts, tornadoes over water, spin gently across tropical seas, from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Aegean coast. They are the sky's softer sketches, visible, peaceful, drifting. Across this globe, the shape of a tornado may vary. Its strength, its size, its surroundings, all shaped by local conditions. But the soul of the phenomenon remains the same, a spiral of air born from contrasts, a moment of upward motion, a gentle stretch between earth and sky. And wherever they form, they carry a quiet message. The atmosphere is universal. It listens, it breathes, it responds to warmth and coolness, to pressure and patience. Tonight, we've travelled far without leaving our calm space. We've seen tornadoes in new forms, across forests and mountains, seas and cities, plains and plateaus. And now we return home to a familiar question. How do we measure a tornado's strength? Not with fear, but with curiosity. Let's softly open that next chapter together. When we think about tornadoes, we often picture motion, air swirling, clouds descending, a quiet meeting between earth and sky. But sometimes, we wonder how strong that swirling truly was. Tonight, we'll explore the Fujita scale, a gentle tool used by meteorologists to softly estimate the strength of a tornado based not on the storm itself, but on the marks it leaves behind. But don't worry, this isn't a scale of destruction. Not here, not in this quiet space. This is a scale of observation, of noticing, of interpreting nature's signatures with calm eyes. It all begins with a man named Tetsuya Theodore Fujita. He was a researcher, a dreamer of skies, a curious scientist who longed to understand the secrets of wind. In the 1970s, he introduced a scale not to dramatize storms, but to classify them, gently and thoughtfully. The original Fujita scale, or F scale, assigned tornadoes ratings from F0 to F5, based on the damage left behind. But damage, of course, is just a proxy, an indirect clue, because we can't place an anemometer in the center of a tornado and ask it to quietly report the wind speed. So instead, we look at trees, roofs, fences, barns. We look for what has shifted, what has bent or fallen, and from that, we estimate the winds that passed through. F0 is the lightest rating, winds of around 40 to 72 miles per hour, enough to bend small branches, to lift a few tiles, but often leaving little trace. F1 might sway trees, nudge a vehicle, unhinge something that wasn't tightly held. F2 is where structure begins to change. Roofs peeled gently, larger limbs scattered. F3, F4, and F5 represent more intense wind estimates, each based on increasingly noticeable traces left behind. But even these numbers are read with care, with post-storm calm, with teams of meteorologists walking slowly through the scene, noting, sketching, listening to what the air has written in its passing. In 2007, a refinement came, the Enhanced Fujita Scale, or EF scale. It expanded the categories, adding more detail, offering better tools to estimate wind speeds based on a wider range of structures. Now, instead of just fences and trees, we consider how homes are built, how anchors are placed, how each element responds uniquely to wind. The scale still ranges from EF0 to EF5, but with more nuance, more gentle observation, more understanding. And through all this, there's something quietly beautiful about it. We don't measure tornadoes in the moment. We measure them in memory, in reflection, in the soft pause after the wind has moved on. The Fujita scale is a whisper, not a siren. It's a way to read the story the sky has written, to trace its arc with reverence, not alarm. And perhaps what matters most is not the number at all, but the care taken to assign it, the curiosity, the patience, the quiet science of listening to what the weather has softly left behind. As we close this chapter, we carry a new kind of understanding, that even strength can be measured gently. That wind, even when fast, can be studied with calm hands and soft words. And now we look upward once more, toward the night sky, toward the slow, circling beauty of rotating clouds. Because next, we drift into moonlight. Chapter 37, After the Storm, Atmospheric Memory. After the sky has spun, after the clouds have shifted, and the winds have danced across the land, something quiet remains in the air. Stillness. Not just the absence of sound, but a subtle presence of what once passed through, a memory held aloft in the invisible threads of the atmosphere. Tonight, we rest in this space, this tender pause after the storm. The tornado has moved on, its spiral now unwound, its energy returned to the sky. But the atmosphere is not quick to forget. The winds carry a different shape now. You can feel it in the way the breeze no longer moves straight, but gently circles, as if echoing the spin that once lived here. The clouds, too, seem to float with more awareness, as if remembering their role in something ancient and passing. There's a term meteorologists sometimes use, storm-relative helicity. It's a way to measure how the air moves after a storm. But in this quiet chapter, we don't need equations, just our breath and the feeling of air that's been stirred and settled again. You might walk through a field the morning after and notice the grass all leaning one way, not broken, just brushed by the hand of wind. Soft traces, curved as if the earth itself sighed. You might see trees that have lost a branch, yet still stand tall, calm now, bending gently in the returning breeze. Or fences, slightly tilted, not ruined but changed. Even small pebbles may lie differently, nudged by the breath of rotation that once spun above. These are not scars. They are signatures, the sky's soft handwriting across the land. And the air smells different too. there's a cleanness that follows, like the world has been rinsed, not in water, but in wind. In this phase, meteorologists often return to observe, not just to study damage, but to listen to what the atmosphere reveals in silence. They walk the land slowly, noticing leaves turned upward, patterns in fallen straw, circles in the dust. Each subtle mark tells a story, not of fear, but of motion, of transition, of weather's memory softly pressed into the landscape. Even the sky appears humbled. The towering clouds that once reached miles above the earth now flatten into gentle sheets, altostratus and stratocumulus, drifting quietly as if resting after their performance. There's a rhythm to this moment, a softened heartbeat in the air, a sense of something held, then released. And for those who watch the storm from afar, the feeling is often one of reverence. Not fear, not relief alone, but respect for the sky's ability to move and to be still again. Atmospheric memory is not a scientific term. It's a feeling, a knowing, a quiet intuition that the weather holds on to the story of what it was, even after it has passed. And now, with the breeze calmer, the clouds quiet, and the earth gently turning toward night, we settle in, because next we listen, not with worry, but with gentle curiosity. Chapter 38 awaits the sound of a tornado from a distance. Let's float forward. If you stand far enough from a tornado, you may not see it, but you might hear it. Not a roar, not a crack, but something softer, stranger, a low hum, a distant rumble, a whispering vibration that seems to rise from the earth itself. Tonight, we pause to listen, but we do not rush toward it. We simply remain still, ears open, breathing in rhythm with the air. The sound of a tornado from a distance is often compared to many things: a passing train, a deep waterfall, or the distant roll of thunder, but with a steady, persistent quality. And yet, each one is different. Some seem to hum, low and long. Others moan, like the wind inside a hollow cave. Some rustle gently, like leaves stirred by invisible fingers. The sound is shaped by many things: the terrain, the humidity, the size of the tornado, and even the air itself. Soft hills can muffle it. Open plains can carry it for miles. And the night. The night makes it feel deeper, slower, more present. There's something about nighttime sound. It travels farther. It wraps around you. It holds you in place. In the distance, the tornado is not a threat. It is simply a presence, moving, breathing, announcing itself, not with panic, but with vibration. Some people who've lived on the plains their whole lives say they can feel the sound before they hear it, like a subtle pressure in the chest, like the earth telling them that something ancient is passing by. It isn't loud unless it's near. From afar, it's more like a low tone held on the edge of silence. A note plucked from the sky, reverberating gently through grass and grain and open air. Animals hear it differently. Cattle may turn their ears. Birds may pause in mid-flight. Even insects grow still, as if tuning in to something we can barely perceive. But we don't have to understand it. We don't have to name it. We can simply listen to the quiet before, the murmur during, and the stillness after. Because sound is part of weather too, not just wind and rain, but the voice of movement, the tone of sky shift. And in these soft sounds, we find ourselves more connected to the atmosphere, more attuned to the quiet rhythms above. So, as we listen tonight, we do not listen for warning. We listen for wonder, the hush between the gusts, the distant pulse of air, the sonic lullaby of a rotating world. And now, As the last notes fade, we prepare to journey across the landscape once more. Because next, we drift across the open earth. There are times when the sky nearly spins. The conditions are close. The warmth is there. The moisture. The wind that changes direction with height. The lift that begins to rise. And yet, nothing happens. No funnel. No spiral. No wind sweeping down to meet the earth. Tonight, we float with those near misses. Those quiet moments when the atmosphere begins to build, but then gently lets go. Meteorologists often speak of potential, of energy held in the air, like tension in a spring. They measure it in numbers: cape, shear, dew points, LCL heights. But weather isn't just math, it's mood, and sometimes the sky simply changes its mind. Let's imagine a storm that begins its upward stretch. Rising air forming a strong updraft, moisture condensing into a tall, billowing cloud, a growing shape climbing toward the stratosphere. Inside that cloud, rotation begins. A mesocyclone tries to organize. You can feel the atmosphere pause, as if deciding. And then, a small change. Perhaps the inflow weakens. Perhaps the cap, a layer of warm air aloft, holds a little too firm. Maybe surface winds shift just slightly, breaking the rhythm, and just like that, the rotation never tightens, the funnel never lowers, the energy disperses softly, like mist dissolving in morning light. These are the storms that don't make the news. They leave no path, no signature across the ground, but they carry meaning too. They remind us how precise a tornado's birth must be, how delicate the balance, how the atmosphere needs not just the right ingredients, but the right timing, the right layers, the right whispers of wind. And when those don't align, the storm simply exhales and lets the moment pass. From the ground, we might see towering clouds with dramatic shape. We might feel a breeze tug slightly stronger for a moment, then fade. Birds continue their flight. Trees sway, then still. And overhead, the clouds begin to thin, stretch, and gently drift apart. Some meteorologists call these non-tornadic supercells, storms that had the architecture, but not the spark. Others may call them failed attempts, but that isn't quite fair. They are simply storms that chose not to. And sometimes, those watching from afar, storm chasers, sky gazers, or quiet observers in their own backyards, feel a deep kind of awe. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost did. Because nature often shows its beauty, not in action, but in restraint. And in this chapter, we learn to appreciate the silence that follows a possibility. The calm that steps in when a storm gently bows out. No wind, no damage. Just a sky that once considered, then returned to stillness. We drift with that stillness now, because one chapter remains. The end of rotation, the return to balance. Let's float gently into chapter 40. All storms end. Even the mightiest supercell, with its rotating heart and rising towers, eventually exhales. In this final chapter, we observe the sky not as it builds, but as it unbuilds. Softly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. It begins with a weakening of the inflow. The warm, moist breeze that once fed the storm starts to fade. The winds at different levels no longer support rotation. The updraft loses its strength. The storm becomes tired. We might still see tall clouds overhead, but their edges are no longer crisp. They begin to blur, to fray at the margins. What was once vertical becomes spread out. What spun begins to drift. This is the sky's reset, a calm process, a graceful unwinding. Some call it dissipation. Others say the storm has fallen apart. But here, we see something more poetic, a return. Clouds that once towered now stretch thin like silk. The mesocyclone, that deep rotation, begins to slow, its spin becoming a slow circle. Then a wobble, then a breath, and finally stillness. The downdraft spreads gently across the ground, cooling the air beneath. Not harsh, just a soft wave moving outward. The anvil cloud, once vast, begins to melt into the upper sky, its ice crystals catching the last light of dusk, glowing faintly before they fade into evening grey. And all across the land, the atmosphere softens. Birds return to their calls. The wind becomes more aimless. Raindrops, if they fall, do so slowly, not in sheets, but in light taps upon leaves and windows. The balance has been restored. You see, the sky doesn't end with force. It ends with grace, and it always finds a way to smooth itself out. The boundaries dissolve, the energy returns to quiet potential, and the air once again becomes a canvas, ready to be painted upon another day. This reset is not dramatic. It is humble, essential, soothing. It reminds us that even in nature there is pause, there is rest, there is time to settle. We close our journey here, not with a bang or a final note, but with a slow fade, a cloud that spreads and disappears, a sky that forgets its tension. The world is calm again, and perhaps now you are too. Your breath is slower, your thoughts are softened, your mind, like the sky, can rest. You've arrived. Let the night carry you. Good night, friend, and calm skies to you. And as our gentle journey through tornado formation comes to a close, may the calm winds, the soft spirals, and the quiet balance of the atmosphere stay with you tonight. We've wandered through the silent mechanics of the sky, from rising warmth to quiet spin, from invisible shifts in wind to the tender way clouds begin to rotate. We've followed the atmosphere's most curious creation, not for fear, but for understanding. And in doing so, we've discovered that even tornadoes, so often seen as chaos, begin with softness and end in stillness. I hope this brought you a sense of ease, a deeper breath, and maybe a new way to look at the wind. You're always welcome here. If these peaceful explorations bring you comfort, feel free to like or subscribe, only if it feels restful to do so. There's no pressure, just presence. Now, let your thoughts settle. Let the clouds part in your mind. Let the stillness in the sky become your own. You've arrived. Your breath can slow. The atmosphere can rest. Good night, dear friend. Peaceful dreams. And calm skies to you.